Good morning. Welcome to our second Bar Advisory Group meeting for calendar year 2019. My name is Patrick DeRay. I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and I want to welcome everyone to today's meeting. We have a really busy agenda, and it'll be a challenge to get through it today, but I suspect that we'll all be courteous of the time constraints, and we won't have most likely a time for a break, so we'll just plow through all of the various presentations. We'll definitely have time for questions and answers after each presentation, but yes, we do have a very busy agenda. I can't believe the great weather we're having here today, and it's been a long time coming, so I hope you enjoy after we finish today our meeting, and during the break between our meeting and our workshop later today, get some time to enjoy some lunch, maybe out in the sunshine. Before we get started, we'll go around the room and have each of the Bar Advisory Group members introduce themselves, and then we'll kick it off with our first presenter shortly after that. Start on this end.
Hi, Megan McKernan, Automobile Club of Southern California.
Dritz, California Automotive Teachers.
Dave Robinette, ICAR, West. You gotta turn it out now. It's right there. Jack Moladona from behalf of the California Auto Body Association.
Ruben Parra, California Automotive Teachers.
I'm Dave Kusa, Automotive Service Council of California.
Lou Anapolsky, California Midas Dealers Association.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition.
Nikki Ayers, Independent Automotive Professionals Association.
Jeff Cox, the Automotive Maintenance Repair Association.
Christy Babb, Automotive Oil Change Association.
And Brian Moss with the California New Car Dealers Association.
Well, we have filled all of the seats up here. Sorry, Brian, you're in the
I got
we got an extra seat actually here if you want to join us.
I got it plugged in for you, man.
In the penalty box. Hockey playoffs are started, so yeah.
One's only a 2 minute.
What I should have mentioned at the outset is that we are having this meeting webcast, correct? As we always do. And the meeting and participants who want to join us and have questions or comments and participate that route can do so. Send us an email at barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. Is that correct? Barmeeting, all one word, at dca.ca.gov. Lastly, I want to mention that we have always striven? Strove? We always worked diligently to make sure that our presentations in advance of the meeting get posted to our website. Unfortunately, that was not possible this time. We did send all of the presentations out to the Bar Advisory Group members. After the presentations, after today's meeting, we will have all the presentations posted to our website. That is in large part due to some changes that are going on right now to bring our website into compliance with certain ADA requirements by July 1st, I believe, where all boards and bureaus will need to certify that their websites are in compliance. So we're in the midst of transitioning or making sure that all of our content on our website is in compliance with that new legislation. One of the things that's a challenge then, of course, is oftentimes after we've presented here at our meeting, there are some minor changes, no content-related changes, but typos and things like that to some of the presentations that we like to clean up and repost. Well, that becomes a challenge when we are constantly having to post multiple. We would be, under this new law, posting both versions of those documents, and it's a lot of work. So we would prefer to do that just once. And so I think at least for the foreseeable future, we'll try to get the presentations posted on or shortly after the day of the meeting. In advance, it will be a challenge. We'll continue to work towards that goal, but that is what we are transitioning into right now, and that's why many of the presentations weren't available and aren't available and won't be until after today's meeting. All right, let's proceed. I want to introduce Karen Nelson with the Director's Office. She is the Assistant Deputy Director with the Office of Board and Bureau Services. Did I get that all right?
You did.
For the first time ever? Okay.
Well, no, thank you for always promoting me in your other meetings where I am the Deputy Director, although, good morning, Karen Nelson, Assistant Deputy Director with the Office of Board and Bureau Services with the Department of Consumer Affairs. Chief DeRay, advisory group members, thank you again for always allowing us an opportunity to provide some brief updates about the department and some activities we've done over the past couple of months. I'd like first to start with the Technology Advisory Council. On March 7th, the department hosted its first Technology Advisory Council meeting, led by Deputy Director of Information Services, Jason Piccioni. The council will discuss trends in technology and government and provide guidance and general direction to our innovative efforts here at DCA. The Technology Advisory Council will recommend strategies about direction and propose enterprise computing and information technologies, and will also make recommendations about policies consistent with the goals and objectives of DCA for proper use of computing resources. Continuing on with our technology theme, wanted to share with you all the DCA's Open Data Portal. Back in January, DCA's Office of Information Services announced the launch of DCA's Open Data Portal. It's a publicly accessible one-stop shop for licensing statistics and information where users can see trends and changes in licensing data going back about 3 years, which can be filtered by individual board and bureau and even by individual license type. This month, OIS Data Governance Team announced the incorporation of not only licensing but also enforcement and application data into this open data portal. In the enforcement section, users can access information on the number of complaints received and referred for investigation. Also available is data on case aging, including cases that end with or without disciplinary action. In the application section, users can access information on average application processing time and initial exams, as well as processing times for incomplete applications. All in all, the Open Data Portal does provide us with customizable ways to access this data and analyze it for our boards and bureaus. Many of our programs are now using this as a way to really visualize and present to their members about what's currently happening with their processing times. And I do encourage you all to take a look at this new resource, which is now available on the DCA website under the tab called Data. Next, I'd like to provide an update on the Future Leadership Development Program. In May, this year's cohort, consisting of 8 individuals, will be graduating and celebrating their accomplishments. This year's cohort have been working very hard for this moment for the past 8 months. In the 8 months, participants have worked with their mentors, heard from executive officers and board members regarding pertinent qualities and characteristics of executive leadership, completed a team project that directly impacts DCA as a whole, and networked with various stakeholders, all to reach a better understanding of what it's like to be an executive level leader. Again, I'd want to acknowledge Mr. Matthew Gibson, which I believe is in the audience today. There you go. Who is currently a part of this year's cohort. And again, thank you for Chief DeRay for your commitment to this program and being a mentor to our attendees. And that concludes my department update for today. And thank you again for your work and your partnership.
Thank you so much, Karen. Do we have any comments or questions? Okay. Thank you again.
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, we do have one from the audience. Mr. Peters.
Yes, hello. My name is Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. And sometimes I start a conversation by indicating that I'm confused. And this isn't one of those cases. That there's been a couple of items that we perceive that there could be significant improvements in our business and air quality efforts in California with two fairly simple additions, one being an observation of the emissions label with something entered into the smog machine indicating something relating to engine family or something that could have something to do with warranty over time. And another issue is something that's software that's a part of the system where if a car has failed a previous test within a certain time frame, that there's notice given to the technician providing the service. And our original proposal on that, which was incorporated in a letter to the governor and the entire legislature, signature required quite a number of years back, was under Wilson, to give you an idea, that we feel could significantly improve the performance of the smog check program. The combination of the two, in our opinion, have this possibility of doubling the effectiveness, the performance of the smog check program pretty rapidly with a very minimal cost. The only thing that's different about our car that previously failed, our proposal and the implementation are different in that the technician is provided notice before any information on the smog check is entered into the machine. And we think it should be after all the information has been entered, providing flexibility to abort the test, fix the car, do anything, total flexibility to change the outcome, but all the entries are made, and we think that if the cars are decided to go ahead, a small percentage of those ought to have to go to the referee and be reviewed by somebody from the Bureau of Automotive Repair as well as the referee, and that audit process and the awareness of the warranty possibilities, we think could make a very significant impact on the air quality and performance of the system and its survivability. I'm still confused. We don't seem to have any ability to get that accomplished, I guess because I'm not smart enough. So I just wondered if there's any kind of an update on that possibility. And by the way, this has gone to the director's position and the previous director, but we seem to always fall down before we get anything actually accomplished. And we think that the implementation has a possibility of being reasonably simple and inexpensive to do.
Well, thank you for the comments. I don't have an update prepared on the spur of the moment right now, but we certainly can have a discussion offline about any updates that have happened and even provide any information relative to your question at our next meeting. Thank you, Karen. I failed to do something that I want to make sure that I continue to do, but I'm kind of disjointed here kicking this off this morning. I wanted to introduce my executive office team, Shelley Whitaker, Deputy Chief of our Administrative Division, Clay Leak, with our Engineering and Technology Services branch. Is Doug? I thought I saw Doug Bellotti in the back there. Doug, Assistant Chief. Thank you. And I didn't see till just now. I had a script for the reason why the presentations aren't yet available, and I'll just read it. The final webcast and PowerPoint presentation slides for today's meeting will be posted on BAR's Bar Advisory Group webpage. By early next week, the final presentation slides will include any updates identified during the meeting and will be made available in a format that's compliant with accessibility requirements that were recently implemented by the Department of Consumer Affairs pursuant to Government Code Section 11546.7. There you have it. And then lastly, I wanted to acknowledge publicly our announcement of our director, Mr. Dean Graffilo, who is going to be leaving the department He announced that he would be leaving probably about a month ago to all of us bureau chiefs and board executive officers and his executive office team about a month ago. His last day is tomorrow. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with him. He has been so easy to have a very positive relationship and been so supportive of me and the Bureau of Automotive Repair. And this department is really going in a tremendous positive direction, and I can't thank him enough for his leadership. It will be missed, and we wish him well. It is not available publicly yet where he will be moving on to, but wherever that is, I'm sure he'll have much success. He has done a tremendous job kicking off or getting up established the Cannabis Bureau here at the Department of Consumer Affairs in just 2 short years. He's just barely over 2 years. That was a huge undertaking, as well as kicked off a number of initiatives internally that have helped streamline business processes for all of us boards and bureaus. And I just want to publicly say that I've enjoyed so much the working relationship with him and his leadership, and we wish him well. All right. Having done all the things I should have done at the outset and just now completed that, we'll move on to our legislation and regulations update from Holly O'Connor, who was just, congratulations are in order, just recently promoted to our senior regulations coordinator position. You were the junior. Now you've elevated yourself to the senior position with the departure of Brian Clark within the last month or two, and that vacancy was available, and so happy to see you and your maturity and your transition into this new position. You have done a remarkable job in just 6 months or so on this job and with the Bureau. So congratulations. That now means we still have another vacancy to fill, but we will do that and take care of that in short order. But congratulations and welcome to today's meeting.
Thank you very much. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly O'Connor, and I will be providing the legislation and regulations update today. Beginning with legislation, I will provide a brief overview of pending bills that may be of interest to the industry. And on the regulatory side, I will provide an update on BAR's pending regulatory packages. Beginning with legislation, there are 10 bills that I'll be reviewing, starting with AB 142. This bill would increase the manufacturer fee on lead-acid batteries from $1 to $2. Currently, it's with the Appropriations Committee, and there is no hearing scheduled. AB 161 deals with electronic proofs of purchase. Beginning in 2022, AB 161 would require that a receipt or proof of purchase for goods or services be provided electronically, unless a consumer specifically requests that it be in paper form. AB 210 would exempt all motor vehicles, including diesel-powered vehicles manufactured prior to the 1983 model year, from the smog check program. Currently, vehicles manufactured prior to the 1976 model year are exempt. AB 390 deals with fix-it tickets for noise violations. California Vehicle Code requires that all vehicles be equipped with an adequate muffler to prevent excessive exhaust noise. And last year, AB 1824 passed, which changed the way that noise citations work. And as of January 1st of this year, fix-it tickets are no longer issued for these noise violations. This bill, however, would revert that and allow the issuance of a fix-it ticket rather than an automatic fine. AB 755 increases the California tire fee. Currently, the fee is $1.75, 75 cents of which goes to the Air Pollution Control Fund. This bill would increase the tire fee by $1.50, bringing it to $3.25. And that additional $1.50 would go to the Stormwater Permit Compliance Fund and would make the money available to the State Water Resources Control Board. AB 949 deals with unsafe tires. This bill would prohibit an automotive repair dealer from installing an unsafe used tire on a motor vehicle for use on a highway. This would not apply to a tire that is temporarily removed from a vehicle and reinstalled on the same vehicle. AB 1359 would require the California Highway Patrol to convene an advisory working group that includes representatives from the California Highway Patrol, the towing industry, the insurance industry, and other stakeholders to study the feasibility of developing and maintaining a registry of towing companies operating in California. And this advisory group would be required to report its findings and recommendations to the Assembly and Senate Committees on Transportation by May 1st, 2021. And this bill is currently with the Transportation Committee. AB 1538 deals with insurance collision coverage. Existing law requires an insurer issuing a policy for comprehensive coverage for a motor vehicle to make the payment in a specified manner. And this bill would make that requirement apply to a policy for automobile physical damage coverage instead of comprehensive coverage, and would state that these provisions do not limit the right of an insured to select the auto body repair shop or repair facility of their choice or decide not to have the vehicle repaired. This bill would prohibit an insurer from withholding payment of reasonable repair cost benefits that are payable under the policy if the insured decides not to have the vehicle repaired. This bill was ordered to the Senate on April 11th. Senate Bill 59 deals with automated vehicles and would establish state policy relating to automated vehicles to ensure that these vehicles support the state's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and encourage efficient land use. This bill requires the Office of Planning and Research in coordination with the State Air Resources Board to convene an automated vehicle interagency working group to guide policy development for automated vehicle technology. SB 460, beginning in 2020, would authorize the DMV to establish a biennial registration period for a vehicle rather than the current annual registration period. So that's it for legislation. Does anyone have questions at this point?
Jack?
Hi, thank you for that report. Jack Molodanoff. I have a question on AB 161. That was the Ting bill that prohibits businesses from providing paper receipts, that's except unless the consumer requests the receipt. Now, the bill was recently amended, and it included an exemption for invoices. The language in there, in my opinion, is broad enough to cover all the documents and paperwork that auto repair dealers provide, including the estimate, the repair order, and the invoice. And I guess my question is, and I know you probably, is whether, what is the opinion of the BAR? Does it exempt the auto repair dealer's paperwork? Does that amendment exempt ARD paperwork?
At this point, I'm not sure about that, but we'll definitely figure that out before the next FAC meeting.
Yeah. Well, that's what the intent is, but I wanted to at least raise it here just to make sure that the BR believes or is consistent with, you know, what I think the industry thinks that is exempt from this bill.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Wasn't aware that that amendment had occurred with the bill. We'll definitely bring it up with our legal counsel and internal discussions as well. I haven't seen that language, so thank you for bringing that up. Other comments or questions?
So,
Yeah, Ruben.
do you know what the outcome was from Senate Bill 59? Apparently it was it went to hearing on April 9th.
It looks, This isn't the most updated slide. It's currently with the Environmental Quality Committee, but there's no hearing scheduled.
Okay. So it was moved to the,
But it passed out of Transportation Committee. Were there any amendments or anything that, do we know?
Let's see. No, there were no other amendments.
okay.
Yeah.
So it moved forward.
Yeah, move forward to another committee. What was the committee?
It's with the Environmental Quality
Quality
Committee.
Committee. Yeah. Other questions, comments? You can see some of the accessibility requirements that I referenced to that government code, larger font. We will not, it'll be difficult for us to have graphs and charts on presentations. I don't know how we'll display those sorts of information that typically appear in our presentations, but that is one of the challenges that we are working on right now with all of our current content on our website. And you certainly can see a standardized template of our presentation, much bigger font, easier to read, certainly. All right, Charlie Peters.
Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. I found the automated vehicle technology bill interesting. That's possibly electric, self-driving, autonomous vehicles. And wondered if there is any possibility of a consideration of the issues I just brought up with the test procedures of the entering into the machine, something relating to warranty issues, to provide some identifications and awareness of the technician as well as the system. And the second issue is we have a very strong opinion that a waiver of the requirements for ethanol in the gasoline could significantly improve the global warming issues in the state of California, and if that also has some possibility of incorporating that in this bill to deal with issues of global warming even more effective than is being proposed.
Thank you for the comments. I suspect that Senator Allen would be interested in some of the comments that you have raised. I do want to point out that we are looking at, and maybe it would be time for a presentation before the end of the year on some things to incorporate into the smog inspection to identify for the vehicle owner outstanding warranty related items. That's something we've been working on. So let's think about maybe a presentation coming up before the end of the year on that and the efforts that are underway. Thank you, Charlie. Any other comments, questions? Okay, regulations portion of your presentation.
Okay, the first regulatory package I'll be reviewing is the STAR program cleanup. The STAR program regulation package has three purposes. The first is to delete outdated Gold Shield program provisions. The second is to amend STAR eligibility criteria. And the third is to revise the STAR suspension process to be consistent with statute. BAR received suggested edits from DCA Legal and resubmitted the revised package to DCA on March 1st of this year. Oh, sorry. And once DCA has completed their review, BAR will file with OAL to begin the 45-day public comment period. The licensing forms regulatory package has three purposes. Increasing the Bureau's application review time if an application contains discrepancies or if the physical address where business is to be conducted was subject to prior disciplinary action or is subject to a pending administrative action. This package also unincorporates BAR's licensing application forms and lists the application components in regulation. And it adds substantial relationship criteria for criminal convictions pursuant to Assembly Bill 2138 that was signed by the governor last year. BAR submitted this regulation package to DCA Legal for informal review on February 15th of this year. And once the informal review is complete, we will submit it for formal review. Next is the training provider requirements. The purpose of this package is to make requirements for certification of smog check training providers consistent with current licensing requirements. Also to authorize training for compliance with laws and regulations, and make conforming changes to disciplinary guidelines. This rulemaking package was submitted to DCA and it is back with BAR, and we are currently working on revisions. Once those revisions are complete, we will file with OAL to begin the 45-day public comment period. The purpose of the brake and lamp stations and adjusters package is to revise ID numbers for station and adjuster licensing applications, license renewal and equipment requirements, handbooks providing procedures related to the inspection of brake and lamp systems and issuance of brake and lamp certificates, and the brake and lamp certificate of adjustment and compliance. Also, it will eliminate the gross vehicle weight rating restriction of vehicles to be inspected and certified by Class C stations. This package was also submitted to DCA, and BAR is currently revising it based on DCA's preliminary review. Once we're finished with those revisions, we will resubmit it to DCA for formal review. The purpose of the repair assistance package is to increase smog check repair assistance participation by providing higher repair contributions based on vehicle model year, reducing pre-repair diagnostic fees for low-income vehicle owners, and to remove unnecessary eligibility restrictions pertaining to vehicle registration. And this package actually was just submitted to DCA Legal yesterday afternoon. So we were excited about that. And once we receive it back, we will make the appropriate edits and submit to DCA for formal review. Any questions regarding the regulatory packages?
Jack?
Yeah, Jack Molodanoff, the certified training reg.
Yes.
I know that's one that we've been working on for quite a few years now. So you said the next steps, you're revising it again?
We are. We're working on closing some loopholes and modifying the text a little bit to make it stronger.
What's the time frame for your revisions?
It's kind of hard to say, but hopefully we'll have it back to DCA within the next couple of months.
So you revise it and then send it back to DCA?
Yes.
No disrespect to DCA, but it seems like it's a black hole when it goes back there. You know, we've been working on this since, it's been quite a few years. It's been over 5 years, 6 years, over half a decade. And I know I've been raising this issue over and over again. So how long will it take now with DCA? What's your anticipation? After you revise it, it goes back to DCA.
Right.
Then they review it. Then it comes back to you, and then potentially additional revisions?
Potentially. Hopefully not, but potentially yes.
What's your best estimate when this is going to be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law?
I really don't have a solid estimate that I could give right now. It just depends on, how quickly it moves through DCA and how many.
Are the revisions extensive?
No, they're not extensive.
Are they technical, or are they substantive?
Few substantive, but mostly technical, but there are a couple substantive changes that we are working on.
Okay, thank you.
I don't recall, were there changes that were made to the training requirements as far as the ability to have training provided on laws and regulations and things like that would be helpful with court-ordered decisions or even stipulated agreements in some of our cases? Is that still in that?
The proposed changes I haven't seen yet. They're working on them.
Who's they? Oh, you mean DCA?
No, us.
Oh,
BAR.
okay. You haven't seen them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's still in there. That was one of the central points of that legislation.
I don't
or
think
the regulation package. Yeah.
Being removed, so that would still be in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Ritz. George.
Just a comment that if this requires changes in curriculum for the schools that are providing the training, that's a year-long process too. So add that to,
I don't believe that's the subject of this reg package. It was to align it with our current licensing requirements. That was the central focus of this package. In addition, I wanted to make sure that we were able to point to using the old saying, if you build it, they will come. If we have something that points to the ability for those in the industry potentially who've been disciplined to obtain training as part of an action on legislation and regulation requirements and the laws that they're to abide by, that would be helpful, and we would potentially have programs developed focused on that outside of the smog program, of course. Yeah.
that's
So-
where the timeline of
Sure.
adopting a new course,
Right.
slows things down.
Certainly, and that will, but there are no requirements of specific courses relative to laws and regulations training. I think we're not putting any mandated hours or anything like that together. That will be kind of a marketplace decision of the industry, the training industry in particular.
Any other questions or comments?
I didn't look this way. No, it looks like we're good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Someone texted me, I'm not sure who it came from. It's a 209 area code, but it did say SB, I'm not sure why we didn't have the latest version of your presentation, but SB 59 was last amended on April 1st, 2019, passed out of Committee on Transportation to the Committee on Environmental Quality on April 10. So it apparently was amended. I'm not sure if we had that information, but I don't know. There seems to be a discrepancy on that. But I encourage everyone can you go back to the slide that has where to find all of the latest information? One of the things it's with this presentation in particular is it's a lot like, especially in this time of year, it's a lot like trying to hit a moving target.
That was taken off from the last slide. Since we got this new format.
Oh, okay. Can you go to the slide that shows where everyone can go get the latest and greatest information on any of these bills?
That's what was taken off.
Oh, that was taken off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. It was taken off of the template.
Why is that?
For the new formatting that we're doing for the.
Can you then announce where we can get that information? That's I wouldn't have supported that decision, but okay. And that was Bill who texted me. Thanks, Bill.
It's
Bill Thomas.
ledgeinfo.ca.gov.
Ledgeinfo. Say it again.
Ledgeinfo. .ca. No, I'd have to double check. I can look and then.
We'll get it to you,
Yes.
everyone, by the end of the meeting. Sorry, it's usually up there, and it has Actually, there was a disclaimer on there that said this information may not be as current as because the bill process, the legislative process is what it is, and it's constantly moving. So, yeah, try to get that back on our presentations if possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
All right. Back by popular demand, our CAL-VISTA team. Eric Schwartz from SGS Testcom and Clay Leak, Bar Executive Office. Welcome. Looks like we've reversed the order here. Eric, it looks like you're going first, maybe.
Does that mean I have all the good news then?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I am told. Yes. Welcome.
All right, good. Thank you, Chief DeRay. Good morning, everyone, to the board. And yes, actually, we do have a lot of good news. Look at that. Got rid of it all quickly there. So since I was last in front of you in January, we've actually had a lot of progress on the CAL-VISTA project. In that time, we have actually completed all of the production stages to complete the cutover of the smog inspection system from the legacy environment to the new CAL-VISTA environment that's located at CDTRC. So what that means now is the smog inspection system is 100% running and fully functional in the new environment on the new hardware at CDTRC. And that cutover was completed without any impact or notice to any of the inspection stations, any of the customers, or any users of the system. So it was a highly successful effort. It was done by both teams at SGS and BAR, and it was through all of their efforts over the past couple of years to get this system ready, to test it and prepare it, that this cutover was so successful and so smoothly and without issue. So that's a huge accomplishment for the project overall, and that represents the bulk of the project to get completed was that cutover. As of yesterday, we just finished separating ourselves from the legacy environment. For a while there, we were connected to the legacy, and now we have completely separated. So it is now 100% on the new environment at CDTRC, and it is now its new home for the next 10, 15 years, however long, till the next refresh happens along. So there was a lot of efforts done there. The other efforts is the DR environment, that's the disaster recovery environment that's in San Diego, has been fully set up and tested as well. We have one final test that's actually coming up next week, in which we will move all of our traffic over to that environment to ensure that it's fully functional and operating. And then we will, the following week, move it all back, and the environment will be in its steady state form from there on forward. So once we do complete that, by the end of April, we will be in a stabilization period, which involves just tweaking and adjusting the system and fine-tuning it so that it performs at its maximum capability. And then from there, we just continue to watch it and begin decommissioning of all the legacy environments and that. So from a this one here, the completed milestones, I mentioned that. We've all completed those. And then our completion dates here. So we are on track to complete for the 24th next Wednesday. We are also on track to start the stabilization at the beginning of May and complete the project out by the end of October. So it has been very successful, very busy 3 months, and it has gone very well. And I'm pleased to report that we are nearly complete at this point. Questions?
Excellent. Thank you, and great work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I know we worked, years to get here, so fantastic. And my hat's off to you. You did a great job taking this over mid project.
Yes.
Probably couple years ago, I guess, roughly. And thank you for bringing us to the finish line, more or less. I guess we've got a couple minor things left, but
correct.
Yeah, it looks and sounds like it has gone extremely smoothly. Thank you, and great work.
Thank you.
Clay.
Yeah, before diving into mine, I also want to recognize the excellent work that SGS has done getting us to the finish line and getting production traffic moved over to the new environment. I think it was about a year ago, I stood in front of this group and promised that we would do everything we possibly could to make this migration as seamless and transparent to the users as possible. The goal was no downtime for smog stations. Every technology project has risk, and I think we did everything we could to make that transition as seamless as possible. That said, sometimes you just get unlucky and things happen. This time, it worked out. I just can't say enough about the team, Eric's leadership, the long hours from the SGS team and the BAR team, and the collaboration and being able to work together to get this done is a real accomplishment. So thank you guys for everything that you've done, getting us here. I'm really proud of it, both sides. All right. That said, dive into the second half of the presentation. Really briefly, just a reminder in terms of the CAL-VISTA project, high-level summary of scope. First and foremost objective was to negotiate ownership of the system, which was done early on. Refresh the system to a state-owned data center, which we can now kind of check off the list for all intents and purposes. And finally, publish an RFP to obtain ongoing maintenance and operation services. So in terms of the status, we've kind of been reporting against these baseline dates for some time. Pretty much no changes other than the large one Eric just mentioned, which is the successful transition to OTEC, done a few days ahead of our drop dead date. So green to indicate it's a little bit ahead of schedule. Secondly, the award of the RFP, which is a little bit behind schedule. The 4/26 date is still a target. anticipate that date may be slipping slightly. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll share certainly as much as we can about the RFP award process. And then finally, the contract transition, which is still scheduled for the end of October, and we are looking on schedule to make that transition. RFP. As everyone's aware, we received final bids February 12th of 2018. We have completed our review of those bids, and we have initiated contract negotiations under Public Contract Code 6611, as we indicated that we might in the RFP section Part 1, Section 2.5.2.3 under negotiations. So the award of this contract is pending the completion of those negotiations. Obviously, those negotiations are confidential at this time, so there's not too much I can talk about. Just to make sure we stayed in our swim lane, I actually have a representative from the Department of Technology here who is responsible to govern this process, and ultimately the authority to execute this process resides under the Department of Technology. I'll introduce Deborah Chu, who's over here to my left. So she's here to make sure I don't say anything I shouldn't, and make sure we stay in our swim lanes for the purposes of this meeting and any RFP-related topics. Any questions? Certainly I'm happy to answer at this time, and any questions related to the RFP or the process kind of that we're going through, Deborah's available to answer as well.
Thank you, Clay. Any comments or questions? Jack?
Yeah, thank you. Jack Molodonov, thank you, Clay. Just on the RFP award, you said it was a target date. When do you anticipate? May or and why sort of the delay?
You know, the negotiation process is obviously a little bit fluid, so I think we're doing everything we can to get through that process as quickly as we can. If there is a delay, I don't anticipate it being a large delay. I would say weeks, not months. Days or weeks, not months.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greg Coburn with our engineering and research branch, here to talk to us again about permanent diagnostic trouble codes and the implementation plan relative to that. PDTCs, as they're otherwise known. We've had a workshop, and I think we had a prior advisory group presentation from you. So this is to kind of just finalize the implementation, remind everyone what we have been discussing for probably close to a year, and our plans to roll this out, I believe in July, excuse me. But I'll let you give the precise details on that in your presentation. Thank you, Greg, for being here.
Thank you, advisory group members. There we go. Thank you, advisory group members, for having me out one last time here to talk about the permanent diagnostic trouble codes and where we're at with implementation. This will be an abbreviated refresher of the information that's been covered in the past and the implementation status. Permanent diagnostic trouble codes are, this is kind of the basic pieces of it, 2010 model years and newer. That means we'll basically have the first year we rolled in 2019, we will have 2 model years, the 2010 and 2011 model years because of the 8-year exemption, plus a few change of ownerships and things in there. These are the exact same codes that are in the normal or the regular diagnostic trouble codes. So if you had a P0420 on a normal diagnostic trouble code, it'll be stored in the permanent exactly the same, a P0420. All right, so this is what the industry is used to. They're just literally copied from one place to the other. These codes cannot be erased by a code clear from a scan tool or by disconnecting the battery, so they stay there unlike the other codes. They can only be cleared by the OBD system itself, and there's 2 ways to do that. Either after the vehicle is repaired, and that monitor that triggered that fault has been completed and the fault was resolved. So the catalyst was replaced and it was successful. So why are we doing this? Improve program performance using the new OBD data coming in. That's been coming in since 2015. Remove some of the other influences that may be influencing an inspection, meaning consumers clearing codes, doing different things, trying to get through the smog check. So some of the things that are outside of necessarily the station's control. The main things that this is dealing with on gasoline is the evaporative system. We don't require the readiness monitors to be set for the evaporative system because it can take a long time to set. So we find that this is a large piece. It's half of these situations for these permanent diagnostic trouble codes. So because we kind of have this hole in this program, it'll begin to shrink that up a little bit in a reasonable fashion. For diesels, the majority of the situations are due to the after-treatment systems that are getting more complex on diesel vehicles. Again, we allow any two monitors not be set on diesels because these after-treatment systems can take quite a while to set, and we don't want to inconvenience that consumer too much sitting at the smog check station. So again, this will help shrink that pool down a little bit, but in a reasonable fashion. Targeted implementation date is July 1st, 2019. There's no reason that we shouldn't meet that date. We've got everything in place to get that going. Conditions where the permanent diagnostic trouble codes will be ignored. I think this is an important piece. Basically, it's half of what the US EPA standard is of, not their standard, but their recommended procedure, which is what we first presented to this group over a year ago, is we're going with 15 warm-ups and 200 miles driven. So again, trying to inconvenience that motorist the least amount possible. This provides for two things. The vehicle a reasonable amount of time to recheck for the problems. That's the main piece, and we did look at a lot of data analysis. We are getting this data already. Most of these faults will reoccur at that point. So the check engine light will pop back on if the vehicle is not repaired properly or if it was never repaired in the first place. The other thing it does is it allows the vehicle owner a reasonable amount of time to satisfy the requirement. So let's say there was something in the EVAP system, but it's too cold to run the monitor. This is going to allow the consumer to get out of it for this cycle. This is going to give them that once they drive 200 miles, they made a decent effort. We're going to go and get them through. What's the estimated failures on this? It's a small failure rate. It's going to influence it by another 1%, less than 1%. This will result in approximately 155 additional failures statewide per day. So again, it's fairly small. We're only talking about a couple of model years. We do want to kind of roll this out to the industry, let them get used to it, let consumers get used to it, get all of our facts and everything in place. I think we've also talked about over time that there are some problematic vehicles out there where the permanent diagnostic trouble codes weren't implemented correctly by the manufacturers. We are working closely still with the Air Resources Board and with the manufacturers to get recalls and different things in place to make sure that consumers aren't caught in that loop. The specific vehicles, we've identified anything with problems at this point. There's already been workarounds put in place on the database. So everything's ready to go from that standpoint. So if there's we've talked about some codes that just never clear. They're always there. So once it's set, they never disappear. All of those have been worked around. So the system will see that and it will go ahead and pass the vehicle through. All of those specific instances have been updated in our what we call our OBD reference guide, so that if a shop is using a separate scan tool, maybe to pre-scan the car, or the consumer wants to know if they have any of these, they will know every single vehicle that we're bypassing in the bid by looking at that paper document out on our website. Okay, and that's already out there and updated and ready to go. This is just an example of the vehicle inspection report the consumer will get, and it cut off the bottom here, but it's basically going to indicate that it's a fail at the top. The second blue arrow there is the permanent fault codes, and then it will list them. So what's below that is a P0101. So if it has a failure, it's going to indicate what it is and then a short description of what that permanent diagnostic trouble code was. So if it was the catalyst or whatever, the consumer will have an idea of what that is as well as the shop. Further information, so an ET blast will be being sent to the industry. We're hoping it was sent before the BAG meeting today. It is all queued up and ready to go, so that'll be going out here within the next week. We have a series of 3 ET blasts that will be going out. We wanted to get one out this month, one out next month, and then one out right before implementation, just to remind everybody that the information is out there on our website. If you have any questions, give us a call or an email. BAR's public website is in the process of being updated. Again, it is really close. We were hoping it was already updated and it may be out there. If not, it should be up by the end of the week. So it will we'll basically put it in there in a way that's really easy to see on our homepage. Again, indicated in the ET blast just to get the industry up to date. Talking about the OBD reference document and links to that. We have frequently asked questions around permanent diagnostic trouble codes, many of which came out of this forum. So thank you all for your questions. It's all been incorporated in there. We got a couple of pages just to link everybody through anything that's come up to this point. That will also be going out in the next BAR newsletter as well, those same frequently asked questions. Again, so the industry will have multiple ways to get at this stuff. Training materials will go out early June is what we're shooting for. They'll be fairly simple training, but just in case techs need help understanding this a little bit more, we will have some video series out on BAR's webpage so that instructors and different people can reference that information. As well as we're working on a simple consumer fact sheet, just so that if the station has a problem with the specific consumer asking questions, they have something to hand them. And with that, that's all we have.
Thank you, Greg. Good presentation. Thank you for doing that. We did send an ET blast previously, sometime after your last presentation a year ago. I don't know when, but at least one. I'm not sure.
That's a good point, Pat. We did do one.
Okay.
Yep.
Let people know that they were coming, but obviously we're getting closer, so we'll be ramping those up even more so as we get closer to the July 1 date. Any questions or comments?
I have.
Oh, I'll start here. I saw that hand first. Great. Dave Kusa, excuse me.
Dave Kusa, ASCCA. Greg, as years go by, the 1% increase, do we anticipate that to go up, go down, stay the same as more model years come into the program?
It's a good question. We're assuming that will expand over time as more model years come in the program. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Parra, Ruben.
So a couple of things. One is on slide number 2, I thought I heard you state that there was 2 ways to get these system to clear, but I think what you meant is that there's a 2-step process. The vehicle is repaired and then the monitor runs, correct?
You are correct. Okay. Yes.
And the other one was...
So it's an and, not an or there.
And,
okay.
Yes.
And on slide number 5, so is that 15 warm-up cycles and 200 miles, or is it 15 warm-up cycles or 200 miles?
It's an and.
This is an and. Okay, got it. And then the last thing is for the. So you say you're going to send out a ET blast here pretty quick for the technicians, and how soon do you anticipate putting the training on the website?
So we're shooting for June 1st is what
June
our
1st. Okay.
data. So we'll give them about 30 days in there to
Okay.
see that material.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Anything on the webcast? I haven't been asking, but I assume you would flag me down for okay. Thank you. That's Garrett Garcia and Matt Woodcheck who are monitoring the show today, and thank you for your help. All right, Greg, good stuff. Thank you. We'll probably do a presentation, I'm thinking, after rollout. Obviously, July will be too early, but October maybe? Maybe to give a first 90 days. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that website for bill information, which we will make sure is on the slide before it gets posted, or that presentation on one of the slides that was missing this time around, is leginfo, Leginfo dot legislature dot ca dot gov. I'll say it again. Leginfo, dot legislature dot ca dot gov. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. Our next, now backed by popular demand. Mr. Morrison, how have you been?
Thank you. Very, very nice. Thank you,
Good to see you, Alan.
Again, my name is Alan Morrison. I'm with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, Division Measurement Standards. I'm just going to give a kind of a little brief update with what we're currently doing, and also I have some questions for the advisory panel a little bit later to maybe deal with some issues that we have moving forward. Again, this is my contact information. Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm Alan Morrison. A little before I begin, I want to show everybody a picture of why we test. This is some goo that we found in a drum of ATF. It was actually we identified 3 drums with this product. It's undissolved viscosity improver. So there were multiple transmission failures. The shop actually who installed this had like 3 or 4 cars that failed immediately. So I just thought I would show that to kind of let everybody know that we actually are out there protecting both the consumer and also the shops, because they could not see inside the drum, and when we investigated the drum, we found this. A little bit about the topics I'm going to touch on today. Our program activities, to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what our rulemaking activities, and then an important part is CDFA's role in transmission fluids. This is a big problem within the industry, the oil change industry and the service industry, and I'll be discussing a little bit about that. Kind of some of what our labeling requirements are for that, some of the specifications, and then what our enforcement actions are. And then also I have a slide more of a future, so a discussion with the advisory group. Okay, we'll get on real quick. Program activities. I think over the times I've been here, I've told everyone we have gotten into testing diesel exhaust fluid. We have all the equipment available. We are going out and sampling. We haven't really seen any issues in the diesel exhaust fluid. I think we've only had 2 cases where we had somebody using tap water to make up their own DEF and then selling that. But that was more of a case of really fraud. They were making up their own DEF and refilling containers that they were picking up at truck stops and the like. Most of the places we find, even some of the small blenders are meeting the requirements of the DEF. The motor oil and transmission fluids, we're beginning additive testing. We have the capability to do the metal within those fluids, so we're starting to be able to take a look at those fluids and see if they meet some of the requirements, either the SAE API requirements for the motor oil or some of the requirements for the OEM fluids. Natural gas compositional analysis, we're putting in place the equipment to do that. So we're in the middle of installing that right now. Enforcement, we reopened our Fresno field office, so we now have an investigator there. We also have an agricultural technician to assist the investigator in collecting samples and dealing with issues. Standards development process, we're in the process of developing fuel quality standards for natural gas when used as a motor vehicle fuel. We're working with the NCWM about the motor oil labeling and transmission fluid labeling. Then the interest in the SAE transmission fluid specification that I mentioned the last time I was here, that work has been discontinued because of a total lack of interest on the OEMs. When we put together a panel, we had some industry representatives, the additive companies, and the OEMs were not interested. So that has been sort of moved off to the side for the time being. The new fuel-related problems, I mean not problems, but issues, we have an alternative fuel quality oversight program that is funded, continuously funded under AB 32. So there's no issues with yearly having to go back to the legislature or having to go to the Energy Commission or alike to get funding for that. We're conducting testing of hydrogen, and we actually are doing testing every hydrogen fuel station in the state, not quite monthly, but about semi-monthly. We have a lab in Sacramento and a lab in Anaheim that we're in the process of putting in place. But the state actually goes out and samples each station. We have not encountered any issues with fuel quality other than when the stations are initially put into service, there's some residual cutting oils and the like in the system. Electric vehicle supply equipment. We're developing the capabilities of doing device testing for those meters. So when you pull up to a charging station and you are charging your vehicle, that the amount of electricity you receive is what it says, so it's accurate. We're developing capabilities. Level 1, Level 2, they're fairly easy. Those are AC charging. There's no issue. We're also trying to put in place the DC fast charging, and currently that's at 400 volts DC, and it's anticipated to go up to 1,000 volts DC. So there's some issues there with developing the ability to do that. Rulemaking activity. We're currently in the review process for our proposed regulations for electric vehicle charging systems. We're in the comment period. Like you could imagine, it's quite a politically charged regulation. So we're reviewing that. The state currently has paid or has at least paid for part of most of the electric vehicles charging stations installed. So there's kind of an issue there, and it's proving to be a little bit problematic. Some recent regulatory actions. We have not specifications, but mainly labeling requirements for all natural gas fueling stations. There's a posting requirement of what we call the methane number. Methane number is the equivalent, sort of the equivalent of octane. So we currently do not have any requirement for that methane number, but we have a posting requirement so the consumer at least can be informed about what that is. Hopefully in the future we'll eventually have a quality requirement, but that's waiting for those specifications to be completed. Motor oil assessment fee, our funding source. We now have raised our fee from 4 cents to 5 cents a gallon. So we're currently collecting 5 cents a gallon on motor oil being sold in the state. So there is a little bit of confusion. The California CAL-Recycle collects a fee on motor oil also, but it's also collected on all lubricants. So transmission fluids or industrial lubricants and the like. Their fee is currently set at 24 cents a gallon. So there's some confusion a little bit about whose fee and how much and what products. But we did finish the rulemaking. We kind of modified our documents so they're a little bit more clear, a little easier for the consumer to read. But unlike you they're probably not ADA compliant. So we're in the process of doing that. Pre-rulemaking. One of the real interesting pre-rulemaking processes we're involved in is automatic temperature compensation at retail motor vehicle fuel stations. The state is not in the position of requiring that. We're just putting the regulation in place in case a retailer decides to implement that. So there has been some confusion. The industry thought we were in the process of requiring that. No, we're not. We're just putting the process in place that if you so choose, this is how you do it. Other things we're working on, and a kind of a continuing process, is the method of sale, labeling, and advertising as a result of our AB 808, which was a few years back. So anybody would like to, you can go to the website I've listed. That lists all our regulations, where we're at in the process, and all the available documents. So any questions about that right now? Okay. Okay, next slide. Transmission fluid issues. There are three things that we encounter. One, outright fraud. That's pretty easy to understand what it is. We have criminal activities. We have falsifying of labels and the like. That's a fairly easy, or not easy, but not complex issue, and our investigators are working on various cases. The second issue we get is improperly blended fluids. We do find producers that incorrectly blend their fluids by production mistakes, things like that. That we find not too frequently, but I would say once a month or so we encounter a product that we determine that's what's going on. The third issue, which is a bigger one, is the multi-vehicle transmission fluids, and that is a misunderstanding of the duty type requirements. And that's one issue I would like to discuss a little later on, is I need some help and guidance and how the industry would like us to proceed. Okay, a little bit, just real quick here, this is our statutes concerning our labeling requirements. I just put them on there so you can have it. We won't go through the details. Other than on 13.711.1, where it says the words required transmission fluid on product, that's pretty easily understandable. But one of the issues we have is duty type classification. We are in the process of trying to define what that actually means. There's a current version that the state has, and we're seeing if that really goes along with what industry thinks we should have. A little bit, this is what's required on all product. Again, the duty type classification, we currently interpret that as an OEM specification or a consensus specification. Currently, there's only one consensus organization out there, that's the JASO standard. SAE doesn't have one, but again, if they did, we would be able to take that specification and use that as a duty type classification. Okay, a little bit about our position on duty type. We accept all OEM active specifications. We accept obsolete OEM specifications. So, for example, a Dextron 3, which is an obsolete specification, you can label your product a Dextron 3. We're okay with that. And then the JASO or other consensus organization specification. JASO has a low viscosity and a high viscosity specification, so you can label your fluid meeting either one of those. We also interpret the terms such as meet recommended requirements or suitable for use in the same as meet. So if you say this is suitable for use in a certain vehicle, we interpret that as it meets the specification for that vehicle. And that's our current position. So if you say it's usable in a transmission, it has to meet the specifications for that transmission. The statutes about the actual specifications, I put this up here. As you can see, the state law requires that transmission fluids meet all the latest automotive manufacturers, and you will note that's plural. So if you put 4 or 5 different manufacturer specifications on a label, you have to meet all those requirements. You cannot just meet one. Okay, we'll go here. Again, this is a little bit about what their fluid requirements are. We currently, transmission manufacturers and the vehicle manufacturers set those requirements. They set them primarily to ensure reliability, reduce issues with product failure, and to minimize warranty claims. Those specifications may include specific chemical properties, physical properties, and performance requirements. Now, I put this slide up here. This is interesting. There are 3 major additive companies in the world that provide additives for ATF. And if you go to each of their websites, this is one of the first, these are synopses of what they say, but this is basically what all the 3 major additive companies say on their website. Each one of these are basically saying that ATF or transmission fluids are unique fluids, unique to OEMs and sometimes unique to specific transmissions. And I put that up there. It's important to note that when we interpret the state statute and we go and look at this, these seem to be in line with our interpretation. And that's something I like to point out to industry that we're doing. It's the additive suppliers are saying this, at least publicly, and our legislation says pretty much the same thing, that all fluids are unique. And so Though we do have multi-vehicle fluids out there, and it's anybody who's seen it, who's dealt with transmissions, you realize there are. And they are out there because OEMs sometimes have unique names, so they'll call the same fluid. There'll be 4 or 5 different manufacturers with specifications, but they're the same specification. Many of those specifications use the exact same formulation. And then also the OEM formulations are often proprietary. You cannot get those, so a producer doesn't really know what the OEM has. So say, for example, Toyota has their specification. Well, nobody really knows what that is, or the Mercedes specification. Nobody really knows what that is unless you have a specific contract with those companies. And the last thing is shops have a limited capacity. I wanted to put up a list here of the transmission fluids, and there's over 100 or so, hundreds of them. So it would be a little eye chart. You wouldn't be able to read it. So, and the shop has a hard time with that, and we understand that. So, again, a little bit what I put on here is the producers and the additive companies are making fluids so that they claim will meet the OEM performance requirements, while failing some of the other requirements, such as the viscometric requirements or some of the chemical property requirements. But California law, of course, requires that the OEM requirements be met. So you can see our problem in here. So I'll go a little bit about how we do our enforcement. We go out, we sample, we determine the product duty type and claim specification by looking at the label or product data sheet. So we look at both of those. If you have a product data sheet, we'll look at that. If you have just a label, we'll look at that. The samples are tested to be, they're then brought into the laboratory and they're tested to the physical specifications, the viscometric properties of the fluids. If we have a failure, we take that product off sale. We issue a notice of violation to both the shop and the producer. Another step we do, though, is we also look at it for possible relabeling in case there's multiple claims and those need to be taken off. So rather than removing that product from the marketplace, we'll have it relabeled to meet what it in fact does meet. So that aside, in the future, I would like to ask the board or ask BAR, is it a possibility that we can put together a working group so that I can work with the industry? I need the repair shops, I need the automotive companies, and those of you that represent the automotive companies and the new car dealers and the like, we really need your participation. We need everybody to sit down at the table and kind of let us know, how we should interpret the statutes. We can't go into rulemaking on regulations until we really understand what the whole industry wants, and we need active participation from all the players, the OEMs, the additive suppliers, the producers, and the service industry. So just keep that in mind. One of the things I want to do is I want to identify issues that, shops have issues. They need a product for the post-warranty cars for the fill. What do you do? You can't stock 100 different fluids. It's just impossible, and the like. And we also would like to, through BAR, conduct some more outreach to consumers and to the industry representatives. I don't know if, can you throw up the Word document I have real quick? A little bit, I'll end here real shortly, but go to the first page of the Word document. If you can make that a little bit bigger. I know this is from our statutes right there. Okay. I have a couple issues that I need everyone to start thinking about. Our statute says that, first of all, we're doing good in defining the transmission fluid. So we have CVT transmission or continuously variable transmission fluid. That's fine. Automatic transmission fluid, dual clutch transmission fluid. We're doing real good on the labeling on that, and I think some of the changes have allowed those fluids to be in the marketplace. Go down a little bit. The next, this is somewhat the problem. Our code requirements, there you go. I underlined, required that a transmission fluid shall meet all, and it says all the transmissions disclosed on the label of the container. And then it also says in the second line, for the type of transmission it's intended for. I'm not really sure how to interpret that. I need help from industry. Currently, we have been interpreting as automatic transmission fluid, Dextron 3. But is Dextron 3 really a transmission type? This is a question that we have. And so we need to take a look and discuss with the industry how, nobody labels automatic transmission fluid for transmission type Aston Warner, type 1, 2, 3, or something like that. So we need a little bit of discussion within industry. Is the way we have been interpreting it meet what industry feels that it should meet? The next part, if you look on the mislabeling, again, it says duty type classification. There's really no definition anywhere what duty type classification is. CDFA has, for as long as I've known, for the last 30 years, assume that would be, we'll go back to the earlier one, type A, type F. That was pretty simple when we had type A and type F. We migrated into the Dextrons and the Mercons. We sort of followed that pattern along. Do we continue following that pattern, or is that a mode that may be outdated? So those are things that I need you guys to think about. I need some input. I don't need a decision today. It's not possible, but I do need some input. So with that, I think we'll go back to my presentation. All the stuff that I put on here, I put both our statutes, and I also have listed, I don't know if they can include this in my presentation, are a summary of what is found in Handbook 130 from the National Weights and Conference on Weights and Measures, to sort of compare and look at how state statute and regulation compare with what the National Conference has. So, okay, the next slide is just, I think, I got the slides in here. This is where our statutes and regulations can be found, and here's my contact information. So, yes, John.
Alan, it's good to have you back. We appreciated when you came to CAL-ABC's meeting to really talk about this issue on automatic transmission fluids, and especially given, as you mentioned and pointed out in your presentation, I mean, it's impossible for shops to carry absolutely every fluid type for every vehicle, and that while you have a lot of manufacturers and producers that have an all-encompassing fluid that says meets all requirements for whatever vehicle, but I think your idea to have a workshop on this to really clarify it, because there's a lot of confusion with our members. They're very concerned. They want to be in compliance. They want to be able to offer the right product to the customer without having an entire stockroom full of fluids.
Right.
And so, when we talked before, it was very clear in your presentation that if you're going to take a generic fluid and then put an additive for a specific manufacturer into that fluid, you basically violated the law, because that label no longer reflects what that fluid really is.
Correct.
And so when we were going through that, everybody kind of sat back in their chair and said, well, wait a minute, we've been doing that for a long time.
Right.
And so I think to try and put together maybe with Chief DeRay and the rest of the advisory to either do like a workshop after one of the other BAG meetings to really delve into this, I think is critical, because there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. And I know our members and the other associations around the room here, they want to be in compliance, but they also want to find a better solution than what we currently have.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I would like to. I'd like to make one comment about the additives. Our position at the shops, we're in the position that a shop is not the place where to produce or to change the specifications of a fluid. And the reason why is they don't have the ability to properly measure, properly mix, and the like. The multi-vehicle fluids that I prefer or like to look at are those that are actually made at the producers, where they're made to a specific specification. They're blended correctly. because we've seen in shops, they basically take a you know, thing and pour it in, and say, I think I have enough, and put it in there. And so that's an issue. But as far as the shop being able to have one or two, like I say, a high viscosity and a low viscosity transmission fluid, or something like that, I think would serve their needs. And I think we've seen that as in other places. So, other questions? Yes, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Dave Kusa, ASCCA. So I think the workshop, as John recommended, would be great. Working group, certainly ASCCA would like to participate in that. Okay. Question on the enforcement activities. How often does that happen? You know, the where you go to a shop, sample, find a problem, and then issue a notice of violation. Is that often? I mean, do you have any number?
I don't have a specific number, but I can tell you our biggest problem is the mislabeling, the number 3 on the bullet point, and we're running. It's not as good as I would like. It's probably in the of our 20% of our time that we sample, we're finding that, and that is because of the labeling of the multi-vehicle transmission fluid, and we're working. We're working with all the producers, and I mean major producers. It's not just a little corner guy, but all the oil companies. They all have multi-vehicle products that we've gone through and sort of pared down the list of what they say on the label. And if you even go to some product data sheets, you'll see that it says not for use in California under this application. And Chevron, Valvoline, ExxonMobil, Pennzoil, all those companies have had the same issue. So it's a pretty big problem. And as far as the labeling, as far as the other ones, the fraud, not very often. I mean, we have one area that we just discovered, which is in the contract area. And this is something we haven't been doing, is going out looking at contracts between, say, public agencies and suppliers. We have found a couple cases where a contractor is providing a branded product, and it's in fact not that branded product. So that's kind of a new area that we're going into. But very few. That goo, that was really the only time I've seen something that bad in my 20 years of being with the state. And then the product, as far as production issues, maybe once a quarter we run across a production issue. The wrong stuff's in the wrong bottle, and you call them up and they say, well, our retained samples say this, and then they come back and, whoops, well, yeah, we got them mixed up. So that does happen.
So this is all new to me, the notice of violation stuff, right? So assuming there's a notice of violation and it's fraud from the supplier, right? I mean, shop in good faith bought fluid, thought they were getting what they bought. Is there, assuming no fraud on the or collusion on the shop's side of the equation, if there's a notice of violation, what penalties does the shop suffer? Any?
Our program, primarily notice of violation, entails removing the product from sale. We very, very infrequently actually go to the monetary level. We don't normally cite. We don't for fines and like that. We do that very infrequently. It's usually when there's been you go up to the producer level, or there's some sort of systematic or sort of process within the producer where we may get up to a citation level. For the shops, in essence, we don't give a monetary fine. It's mainly pull the product off sale. That's your fine. You have to replace that product. And if it's from the producer, then the producer needs to replace the product. And in most cases, they will come in, the distributors will come in, pull that product out, and put new product in. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
One other question. I know it's been a couple of years since you gave your presentation, but one of the issues that your team in the field was finding is a lot of cross-contamination in the bulk tanks for oil between synthetic, full synthetic, and regular oil. Is that still a problem in the marketplace, or not as bad anymore?
Well, what we tend to find, the problems tend to be related to specific distributors, and it's a training issue. We'll find one distributor will have a driver that will go in, and it mainly is with motor oil with the different viscosity grades. When it first started with the 5Ws, we would get a lot of contamination from the 10Ws and the single weights. Now we don't see single weights at all. They're not out there. Some of the 0W, 0W20 and all that, they're cross-contamination, but we don't find that very frequently anymore. Probably our biggest failure on motor oils now are low-quality providers not meeting the base stock. So we have so the oil meets viscosity requirements, but we have another test that looks at the base oil. It's a colder temperature test that's in the specification, and that would be one of our major, not major, but we're talking less than 5% failures on motor oils. So that would be probably one of the larger ones. Now, just quickly, I don't have it on there on the fuel side, so you know our real only problem with fuels in California are water contamination. We have high quality gasoline. Our diesel fuel, we have a little bit of a problem with low flash point from gasoline contamination, and we're speaking 5 gallons and 5,000 gallon level contamination. So that's it. Any other questions? Or
Jack?
Jack.
Oh, Jeff, sorry.
Oh. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, Jack Moladano, thank you, Alan, for the presentation. I do agree with the working group or the workshop, and probably makes sense having it after a BAG meeting, and that makes a lot of sense, and I think you'll get some participation from other stakeholders as well as the group here. You mentioned AB 808. I remember the legislation dealing with the oil, and you're in the process of updating the regulations or doing regulations or creating regulations in that arena. I know that's taken a long time. This part of this feedback you're asking for, is that tied into the 808 regulations, or?
Correct. The 808 regulations reside basically in me. I mean, I'm our whole regulation department with that. And so, I don't have a big group like this.
Yeah, see, Holly, you have it so good here.
We within our division would like to finish that. We started that process in 2016, I think it was. So that's only 3 years ago, right? So, so that's not too long ago, right? My daughter made it through high school at that time, so
We can beat that.
She'll probably be finished with college by the time we get it going. But it's part of that is this transmission fluid issue. Last week I was at an ILMA meeting, and I spent a lot of time with a gentleman who had worked with the OEM developing the Dextron 6 specification. And I have some new information about that, and it's moved this up a little bit. And that's why I didn't put in the presentation. I didn't really have too much time to prepare it. But in the discussion with that, with that group, and here, I mean, those of you who, I don't know who represents the Automotive Manufacturers Association. That's somewhere over here, right? I think one of you, somebody represent. I need input from the OEMs, and that's one thing I don't have, and I would like to say I need them to come to the table, because our law basically protects them, right? And so they need to come to the table and say, this is what we can live with, or this is what we can't live with. And then from there, we can work sort of within the system and see how we can craft some regulations that are useful and meaningful to everybody. Right now, we're not going to get legislation. None of us have the ability to do that. I don't have the ability to go to the legislature. I would probably be out of work if I did.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That kind of clarified, because I was involved in AB 808, and I know you were as well. And that legislation gave you the authority, not you personally, but your department authority to create the regulations.
Correct.
And questions have been raised, like, where are we in 808? And now you've clarified that you're sort of the person doing this, and you're still trying to get feedback from industry.
Well, my committal to a working group, and I think that will help. I mean, if we have a working group where we have input from individuals, it will help the process, because it won't be done in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And that's the way I felt before. This is all being done in a vacuum, and I want to bring in your side, which is the vehicle side. You guys represent the cars. You represent the transmissions they go into and the shops that put the stuff in there. And I think you will be a great asset in moving that forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chief DeRay, Brian Moss with the California New Car Dealers. We don't represent the manufacturers, but we can certainly endeavor, if you schedule a workshop, to work with the manufacturer representatives here in town to get you the appropriate context that you need to have an effective workshop.
Okay.
Obviously, they're the ones that make the cars. They decide what the specifications are, and we all follow along with whatever they decide. So you're not going to have a very successful workshop unless you get them there. So,
Brian, there's your contact. Kurt Augustine.
Okay. Oh, actually, no Kirk. So I will.
Mike.
Now that we've committed Kirk to this, so again, I know you're limited on time. I could talk forever. I apologize.
Thank you, Brian.
Any other questions?
We had one here,
Brian?
Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff Cox, the Automotive Maintenance Repair Association. I also just want to echo, I think a working group would be very beneficial. We talked about this topic in one of our meetings and with a lot of the producers that you had talked about, and then API, and there was a lot of confusion from service providers on what they should stock, and just, how do you service transmissions with all the variety of different types of fluids. So I have some presentations that I can share with you from them if that helps you in any way.
Okay.
And, probably could help you with producers if you.
Can I ask when your next meeting is? And I will.
July 18th, here in this room.
Okay. So I will start the process. I will go back to my director and make sure she doesn't slay me for making. But this is a process that it's my desire to start this so that I don't like the way the state of the industry right now. I don't like the way our opposition is to the shops, to the producers, to the OEMs. There's a lot of confusion. CDFA and measurement standards in general, we're about compliance, but we're also about leveling the playing field. We want industry to be able to do their job. We want consumers to be protected at the same time, but we want industry to function as effectively and as well as they can. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Just hold on just a bit. Yes, our next meeting is July 18th. We have the final one for the year will be in October. I don't have the exact date, but if July comes up too soon for everyone, I don't know if that can be pulled off. We'll certainly help facilitate it if that's the desire of everyone. Obviously, it's CDFA's regulatory workshop, and we can certainly get out invitations or notices, public notices from your department to our stakeholders. I'm sure you would do the same with your stakeholder list. Okay. There was one comment via the webcast from the Automotive Oil Change Association, Joanna Johnson.
Yes.
AOCA would like to participate in the transmission fluid work group with CDFA. Alan Morrison, it's a great idea. Thanks to CDFA for offering it. Thanks to BAR for inviting Mr. Morrison to talk with us today. Also, it'd be very helpful if Mr. Morrison could discuss how the NIST Handbook 130's current acceptance of the, quote, suitable for use, end quote, transmission fluid standard, which is established by proving performance in equipment rather than making any claims about meeting specific OEM fluid recipes, fits or does not fit in with CDFA's current transmission fluid regulations. Makes sense to you, I hope.
Yeah, it's yes. Within the handbook 130 is for those of you who do not know, weights and measures laws are the provenance of the states. It is not a federal government requirement. But what the states have done in conjunction with NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is put together a handbook that's a guide for states to establish, either to adopt directly or to establish laws and regulations based on that. Within that, they have quality standards and labeling requirements for various products. For the transmission fluids, what they say, to summarize, is they allow me to say, this is Alan's transmission fluid, and it meets the performance requirements of all these transmissions. And then me as a weights and measures official can go if I adopt this law to you and say, okay, this is Allen's transmission fluid, now prove that it meets these claims by performance claims. So that is written into Handbook 130. We also have within state statute, within our section on, let me move back, on our code section 13741, we have the same authority within the state of California. I can go to you as a manufacturer and request from you documentation proving you meet all the claims. So they're in both of them. It's already in state statute. Currently at this time, we don't do that. We don't go to you and say, here, prove this is all, meets all these claims. Primarily because our statute says you must meet all the OEM specifications. So the Handbook 130 and state law are actually in step with each other, pretty much. They're pretty much in step with each other. But we would like to take maybe what they have in the handbook, look at that, look at state law, see how some regulations can be crafted that meets both of those. So Joanna's comment is well taken, and it will be part of our discussion. So, okay.
Thank you so much. One final comment, it looks like from Bud Rice. John, did you have another comment?
I was going to ask if Alan could get us a copy of that document he showed. Could you send us a copy of that document or send it to
The Word document?
Yeah.
It's on, they have a copy of it on the presentation.
Okay, great.
So
Thank
it could be attached to it.
Okay, thank
And
We'll
I
send
will-
it out to all the
Yeah.
advisory group members if it's not in the package or today, is it not? In
It's
the
not.
hard copy? Okay.
No, it's not yet. I added it this morning, so I apologize.
Thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Hi, Bud Rice with Quality Tune-Up Shops. Alan, one comment that you had made, I think moves the bar a little bit, and I don't want to feel like we missed it. That one comment, and that one comment was, you don't believe the shop should be able to make this modification at the shop level, at the location, right?
Correct.
Okay, if that's your feeling, and I agree, let's have a workshop and let's talk it out, but that one position statement changes the game dramatically for operators. Okay, so at that point in time, either we have to stock a tremendous amount of fluid, or we have to have some ability to order quickly from either an OEM or some kind of a fluid integrator that allows us to be able to operate. And it's going to force us into a box of being able to only say $69.95 for a transmission service plus fluid. I mean, you're forcing us into that box if we don't have any flexibility in increasing our offerings, because nobody can stock all this stuff. It's just not going to happen.
Well, again, the multi-vehicle fluids, currently there's another state statute that prohibits you from being able to add at the shop something to a fluid and change the properties of the fluid. So that is current state law. I didn't list it here, but it's if you go into our statutes, and I can get that to provide you. So there is a current state law that prohibits a shop from taking a fluid, adding something to it, and changing the physical properties of that fluid or changing the performance properties of that fluid. That's where we're at with the shops doing
Right,
it.
right. But in a workshop type format, a large segment of the participation of that workshop would be us trying to figure out an answer to that question. And if the answer is you don't get to answer that question, it just changes the whole dynamic of the thing. That's all I want.
Okay. Well, we I will take that under consideration. I would need input from those persons providing that product. In fact, so I can somehow look at is providing this product to a shop. The shop then becomes a producer. So we could take the code section that says, okay, now that you've made this product, can you in fact demonstrate that you meet the performance and the requirements of that product? So that would put a little bit more issues on the shop. For example, if there's a certain treat rate, if something has a 4.5% treat rate, and I test it for a 4.5% treat rate, do you in fact meet that treat rate? and things like that. So a shop would have to become aware. They would become a producer at that point, and then they would be required to demonstrate those claims. Right now, we treat the shops more as consumers. They're kind of passing through the fluid. They're not making the fluid. They're just passing it through from a distributor, from producer to distributor to the shop to the consumer. So what you do is you put the shop in the position of the producer, and there becomes potentially a lot more requirement that shop would have to be concerned about. So, okay. Yes.
Thanks, Alan. Dave Kusa. So something you just said, so there are a number of companies that produce oil additives, you know, for engine oil and transmission fluid, coolant. I don't know if you monitor coolant or not, but so if we were to do an oil change, right, with and using, you know, supplied oil that meets all the manufacturer's specification, put the additive in the oil that the documentation claims that increases this and that in the oil, makes it a better product. Would that be in violation? I mean, is that changing the formulation of the fluid?
Well, for right now, the statutes on motor oils, there is no statute prohibiting you from adding an additive to motor oil. It's only for what we call automotive products and transmission fluids.
Okay. So I mean, there are a number of additives for transmission fluids as well that are added to a fluid that meets all the manufacturer specifications.
Right now, an installer is prohibited from adding that. The consumer can add it, and I'd like to make a note here that the CDFA's position, if the consumer decided they wanted to put straight motor oil in their transmission, we cannot prohibit that. What we mainly are looking at is the product that you're selling to the consumer. Does it in fact meet what it's labeled to meet? I know I got to go. So
yeah, well, sorry. One last question, because I have a lot of suppliers to approach based on this. Specifically for the transmission fluid additives, do you know the regulation number specifically? If not, I'll find it. But.
I'll research it when I go back to my seat.
Okay.
And I should know the number off the top of my head, but my head is
right
full of stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. Appreciate it. We'll work together in the coming weeks to see if we can get a workshop coordinator scheduled in coordination with our next advisory group meeting. If not that one, the October one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll be at my seat, so at the end of the meeting, I'll have that for you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
Much. Yeah.
And
All right. Moving on. Case processing overview. Bill Thomas with our Enforcement Operations Branch at BAR. This was something I thought would be good for everyone to see. We've had some unwanted media attention. It comes about, like Haley's comment, every few years. And actually almost to the day, 3 years ago, dealt with something similar. But in February this year, we had a news story that was, I think, a little bit of sensationalism in my mind. But,
it's the media.
It's worth, I think, kind of sharing a story from our perspective of what goes into an investigation and what we do to get information available to consumers about shops that potentially they might have concerns with or might want to avoid. And so I thought and also to potentially, there could be a legislative response. So I want to certainly do some education on the front end to make sure that everybody knows what goes into our investigative process. Bill is here with us to talk about kind of the various steps, including after it leaves our hands. When we've completed the investigation, there is a formal process that goes through that includes the Attorney General's office and the Office of Administrative Hearings, as well as our own department on the back end of any hearing to give a final decision of the proposed decision that comes from the ALJ that heard that case. So there's a lot involved in this. So I wanted Bill to come before us to give an overview of what that case processing of a formal disciplinary action entails. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Pat, for having me, and thank you to the advisory group. So as Pat said, recently NBC Bay Area ran an article involving an oil change that turned into an engine failure due to improper installation of the filter assembly. One of the contentions made during the report was that the registrant that performed the oil change, we had actually filed an accusation against them for other violations of the Automotive Repair Act, and that the reporter lamented the difficulties a consumer would have in finding that information. That is, and I've talked to this group, made presentations before about our web license lookup, now called the License Search Program, and that accusation was certainly posted to the web under the license search for that ARD, and so was available to the consumer at the time they chose to do business with that ARD. So we always encourage consumers to go to the license search, click on the advanced search, and then type in the city they're wanting to do business in. And it'll bring up all our registrants, and any documents that the Bureau has filed associated with that registrant is there. The reporter attempted to demonstrate it, may have been in the wrong area of our website, and that's unfortunate. So I wanted to cover that first. I also want to talk about, in the report, it covered that it was almost 3 years from the time of that we first began investigating this facility to when a hearing was going to be held on that matter. And obviously, I think everybody in this room would be concerned that really, if it takes that long, you know, that is a concern that something has to be addressed. So I want to talk about that a little more. Many years ago, late 2000 and 2009, 2010, the department looked at the DCA Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative. I know it by the acronym CPEI. I had to double check my slide to make sure I got those words right. In that initiative, for just about all of the boards and bureaus under the department, there's a goal of completion of an investigation to imposition of discipline of 540 days. And that goal applies to the Bureau as well. And my web link did happen to stay in the slideshow. I'm happy to see that. So anybody can go to that web link. It's dca.ca.gov publications, and you can find the annual reports that lists our cycle times. Also on their publications is Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative numbers that might also be under enforcement. As Karen from the department mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that has now been changed to there's a new link for data, enforcement data, and it is a very good page. I encourage everybody to look at it. So for the DCA annual reports for the Bureau, in 2017 and 18 fiscal year, our numbers showed 808 days to impose from the day we began the investigation, open the investigation number, to the effective date of the decision. It was 808 days to complete that process. We want to highlight in there, and it's also in the annual report on those pages in the DCA report, that within that 808 days, it's 648 days from the day the Bureau completes its investigation and forwards it to the Office of the Attorney General to the imposition of discipline, to the decision effective date. So doing the math, the Bureau's cycle time is 160 days, or was 160 days in 17-18, from the beginning of the initiation of the investigation to forwarding it off to our partners at the AG. In 16-17, it was 719 days in our annual report, and 607 days from our closure to forwarding to the AG to imposition of discipline. So there, again, doing the math, it was 112 days internal in the bar to complete the investigation and forward it out to our partners. So what prompts the initiation of an investigation? There are several things that will lead to the field office determining the need to investigate a registrant. One of those, and I've mentioned it numerous times when presenting the enforcement statistics to this group, is complaint trends. We look at the trends, and if we see a pattern of violations on the part of a repair facility, that will often prompt an investigation. Same with our auto body inspection program. If we identify the potential for fraud, we will certainly perform an more detailed investigation into the ARD. Anonymous tips, and I want to be very clear there. We do receive a number of anonymous tips. Those are fully vetted and discussed between the field office supervisor, the investigator, and Bureau Field Operations Management before going, full on into an investigation. Obviously, tips can be very credible, or they can be a little less than credible, depending on the source. We'll leave it at that. We also use smog check inspection data. Certainly, we capture through the smog check program just immense amounts of data that can be used to point to possible fraudulent inspections. Within inspection data, I would also, there's a subcategory there of data that we capture during an audit of a smog check station, observations made by the auditor, and things such as that. And then other sources, that's the top secret. I'm not going to discuss on the record sources, but those could be, audit findings, as I said. Also, a rep can be driving by, and this is mostly for unlicensed activity, see a repair shop and wonder if they're licensed, to look on their phone or on their laptop while in the field and see that they are not, and will serve an unlicensed activity citation on that facility. So drive-bys, involvement in the community, knowing their area where our field reps enforce the Automotive Repair Act will often lead to an investigation. So once we have determined an investigation is necessary, the representative will work with the field office supervisor and conduct the investigation. Many of the techniques used, are well known. The Bureau's undercover vehicle operations program is well known within the industry. We also do surveillance, and we have submitted thousands of hours of video surveillance to in hearings as part of investigative cases. We will review advertising for repair facilities and see if it appears to be in compliance, or if there appears to be some misleading statements within the advertising designed to induce customers to come in when it shouldn't. And we'll also go out and review documents at the ARD as part of an investigation. Look at their estimates and invoices and make sure everything is in compliance with the law. Once sufficient evidence has been obtained, a report will be written. That report is prepared by the investigator in the field office and submitted to the field office supervisor or his or her designee, and is reviewed obviously for grammar and spelling, formatting, making sure the information is correct, dates, times, license numbers, so on and so forth, and that the evidence supports the allegations. In other words, we state the repair facility violated this law. Does the evidence prove that violation? Once the field office has approved the report, they route it through their management team, and it comes to bar headquarters, specifically my branch, the Enforcement Operations Branch, and is reviewed again. We have a very detailed and long quality control process, but it results in a very successful product from the Bureau. My unit will review the same items, grammar, spelling, formatting, factual information, and also will look at the exhibits and make sure those are accurate and correctly numbered and correctly referenced. Once it is approved within the Enforcement Operations Branch and within headquarters, it is forwarded to the Attorney General. The Attorney General will, it's forwarded to the Supervising Deputy Attorney General in each of the AG's 5 field offices, pardon me, 6. 5, 6. 2, 3, 5. 5. Sometimes count the Bay Area as 1 because Oakland, San Francisco. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Lou, for helping me out with that. Submitted to the Attorney General, the supervising Deputy Attorney General, who will sign it to one of the Deputy Attorney Generals within the office. He will review the report. He or she will review the report and determine, is there evidence to sustain an accusation. Another way of phrasing that is, do they see the evidence in the report? Are they comfortable going before an administrative law judge and arguing that these violations took place based upon this evidence? They will then prepare the accusation. The pleading document is drafted by the Deputy Attorney General. It is sent back to the case analyst within my unit. They will review the accusation for accuracy. Again, dates, facts, times, so on and so forth. We don't really do a whole lot of review on the legal pleadings and the sections of law cited. That's why we have the Attorney General. They will work with the Deputy Attorney General to make any necessary edits. Once the final draft of the accusation is received, it is placed in a folder with a copy of the original investigative report and presented to the Chief of the Bureau for final approval and signature. An accusation is considered filed by the Government Code the day it is signed by the Chief, not when it is served, but when the Chief signs the accusation, it is considered to have been filed against the ARD. It becomes a public record at that point. The accusation is when it's signed. The signed accusation is returned back to the Attorney General's office, to the DAG, who will execute service of the accusation, prepare the proof of service, and attach several legally required documents. There's a couple sections of the Government Code, the Administrative Procedures Act, that are required to be provided, including, discussions of discovery and so on and so forth. There's also a blank notice of defense included in those documents. The respondent, to address an accusation once it has been served upon them, they must file a notice of defense stating they wish to contest the accusation, possibly settle the accusation within 15 days. And they can, when filing the notice of defense, they can, as I said, request a hearing before an administrative law judge, request settlement. There's a box to check for the DAG to begin settlement procedures, or they can elect not to file a notice of defense. If a notice of defense is not received within the 15 days, the director may and will issue a default decision against the respondent. If a hearing is requested, the following will occur. The DAG will work with the respondent to set a mutually agreeable hearing date. This is important, and it is somewhat of a new step. Previously, new being within the last 2, 3, 4 years. I'm not sure of the exact date. Previously, once the Attorney General's office served the accusation, they would contact the Office of Administrative Hearings to set a hearing date, to have it on the calendar and kind of reserve our spot to get it done. What that resulted in was a lot of requests for continuance on the part of the respondent, because the dates may have worked for the Attorney General's office and bar, but maybe not so much for the respondent. So OAH now requires the Attorney General to wait for a notice of defense and work with the respondent and or their counsel to set a hearing date that's mutually agreeable, so that continuances don't occur as frequently as they had in the past. Once the hearing is held, both parties will present evidence to the administrative law judge. At the close of the hearing, the matter will be formally submitted to the administrative law judge to prepare a proposed decision. The ALJ, the administrative law judge, has 30 days to submit a proposed decision to the Bureau. The Bureau then follows 3 steps. The proposed decision and the accusation are forwarded to the Department of Consumer Affairs Legal Affairs Division. We refer to it as DCA Legal, to review on behalf of the director. The director will generally take one of the following actions on the proposed decision. They will adopt it, as written, as the director's decision, reject the proposed decision and determine the matter based upon the record, or reject the decision and remand the matter back to the ALJ to take additional evidence. As far as adopting, there's a couple other things they can do when they adopt a decision, the director can. He can adopt it with modifications to the penalty if they determine it's inappropriate, or they can adopt it with minor technical changes, say something was incorrectly typed within the proposed decision. We didn't put it in here, but the government code specifies that with a proposed decision, the director has 100 days to act upon it after receipt by the agency to issue a decision, or the decision becomes final by operation of law. Then there's enforcement of the order. The director's final decision will be sent back to BAR for service and enforcement. BAR will serve the decision on all parties and counsel. Generally, a decision will take effect within 30 days from the date of service that's specified in government code. It may be sometimes can be extended beyond the 30 days, such as if the respondent files a petition for reconsideration or files a motion to stay the effective date. Both of those frequently happen or do happen, and the effective date can be extended beyond that. BAR will enforce the decision as detailed in the order section of the decision. We don't have the luxury of applying any interpretation. It is the order of the director. And we enforce it as written. It could include probation, suspension, or revocation, or any combination thereof. If probation is ordered, it'll often include cost recovery, training, suspension, as said before, and thought we had deleted revocation because that's kind of redundant. And that's the general process from start to finish. Questions?
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm sure we do have some questions. Mr. Gallo.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition. Yeah, I think the sad thing about this whole situation is we continuously let the media whip us into a frenzy whenever they have these types of stories. And don't get me wrong, the consumer has a right to complain and has a right to have restitution or any kind of corrective action taken, but too often I see it happen with members of the legislature where they get ambushed, put into a position, forced to create a piece of legislation that goes after the industry to put more regulations in place when we already have the Bureau in place to do the things that they do. And I think what's sad about the way this whole thing happens is we've seen it ever since Joe Grover came out here from Minnesota and went to Los Angeles and started this media frenzy every quarter when it's sweeps period. And whether he's going, the sad part with this particular complaint is the industry is the meat in the sandwich here because they're being used as the vehicle because for whatever reason this particular reporter wants to go after the Bureau. We're not happy about that any more than you guys are. And the sad part about it is we're now looking at potential grading system that Assemblymember Lowe has been talked about in this particular interview, where he was talking about, well, maybe we should have a restaurant grading system for automotive repair. Well, having worked on Rocky Delgadillo's panel for 3 years in Los Angeles trying to come up with a grading system, it was quickly determined that nobody in their right mind is going to want to put a scarlet letter in their front window like they have restaurants do when there's such turnover in our industry as there is. To create a grading system for automotive repair is just not feasible. But going back to this whole situation with the reporter and with all these things that happen every time we're in a sweeps period, this is why the advisory is here. We sit with the Bureau, we sit with all the interested parties, consumers, manufacturers, doesn't matter who, to try and resolve the issues and fix the problems in our industry. We've been doing it ever since the advisory was formed. And I think sometimes, as one of my former coworkers used to say, we have to be smarter than the tool. And the tool is the media. And the problem with the media is it's like any of you that ever remember the old movie, The War Game. At the end of the movie, the answer was the best game is not to play. You can't win with the media because they're ultimately in control of their message. Has nothing to do with the problems that we have, has nothing to do with any kind of resolve other than ratings, period. In the end, we sit here quarterly to resolve the issues that we need for our industry, to provide a level playing field, to provide a better service to the consumers, and to work with the Bureau to create regulations that help level the playing field and get everybody on the same page. And so with that, I appreciate you going through this whole process. I think we've said it all along. Whenever we have any of our members that have had action taken against them, it does seem to take a long time for this to make it through the process and ultimately be heard. And I realize that now that the website's been redesigned and these allegations are now posted, I've had some members already comment with me that, you know, what are we, judge and jury? All of a sudden the thing's already posted, no decision's been rendered whether or not the shop's guilty of anything. You've now got it on the website, and anybody that goes to search for that is going to see it and assume that you're guilty by association. So I think we have to go back to what I said earlier. We have to be smarter than the tool, and we have to figure out a way to work on this together to resolve it so we don't become the vehicle for the media to do nothing more than it always does and tell its story, because your statement or any of our statements that really is the most impactful is going to be on the editor's floor. Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you, Pat. Bill, thank you. Dave Kusa, ASCCA. On slide 2, with the dates, the number of days, so you know, the 160 days in 17, 18, 112 days, is that all inclusive of BAR's action or activity on this? Because it sounds like it's going back and forth from BAR to the administrative law, so on and so forth. Is that every moment? I mean, every day that, or is that just from beginning of the investigation to when it leaves your hands in that first step?
That the total days, the 808 days and the 719 days, is inclusive of the entire process that I just laid out. So the day BAR begins to determines an investigation is necessary and opens it until the day the director issues a final decision, and that decision has become final the 30 days after.
Right.
So,
but
that's
the
AG
slide
time, AG time,
yeah,
OAH time, Office of Administrative Hearings times. That's all the parties necessary in implementing administrative discipline.
Right, but and I'm getting, I'll tell you why. So 808 days is the total. 648 is from closure, and so that's from 648 days from when BAR closes the investigation.
Yes.
Right, goes through there, comes back for the chief to sign it. Right, is that
correct?
Included in that BAR time?
Correct.
Okay, great, good. That's very helpful. So. Evan, Esselman Lowe is my shop's in his district, right? So I've been trying to arrange meetings with him or his staff to find out if there's any proposed legislation, as they were talking about. So far, it doesn't look like there is, but we're working on that. And the only thing I wanted to say too is, based on this one specific report, just to remind everybody, to inform everybody, the system worked, right? When they closed the story, they said that an agreement had been reached between the shop, the company, and the vehicle owner, right? So she either got a $12,000 check, she got a new car, she got a motor put in, whatever it was, right? The system worked. So you guys are doing your job.
I think John's last comment one of John's comments that part may have ended up on the editing room floor where it did. I think we all know things are going to happen. We're dealing with cars. We're dealing with human beings. Things are going to go sideways. It's how it's resolved that's really important, and that's really what BAR looks at.
Agreed. Yeah, and this. So thank you for creating this presentation, because this is great information to put in front of someone in Low, right, and say, here's the process, right? Wherever this disconnect is, wherever this 3-year thing took place, it's not BAR. Right, it's not the industry, right? It's somewhere else out there in that process. And I'm not saying that the process shouldn't take 3 years, right? I mean, investigations and processes take what they take.
Right.
But I don't think BAR's side of the issue needs scrutiny, right? It's not BAR that's slowing it down.
We apply enough scrutiny to our process on a daily basis.
Sure.
We do. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Any others? No. Just kidding, Jack. Go ahead.
You get whiplash.
Thank you, Bill, for the presentation. So I just wanted to clarify something you said early on. You said that in the news story, or at least in part of the news story, that the subject shop, the Attorney General accusation was on the website. It was posted.
yes.
But neglected to be mentioned during the story. Is that, because that wasn't clear in the story. It was some confusion about that.
The story didn't. The reporter showed looking through our accusations filed, but he lamented on the accusations filed is a table the Bureau puts up monthly that lists the accusations that have been filed by the Bureau that month. And that's where the reporter was looking. And he might have had more success finding the actual accusation had he looked under the license search, because at the time the story ran, I know the accusation was up on the website.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I just wanted to make sure. So in terms of the disciplinary discussion you've had here today, we really are talking about the most egregious type cases here, the fraud cases, what I call the fraud cases, because there's other disciplinary action the BAR may take based on a complaint, right? They can go through and have an office conference or an educational process or a proactive conference. So what you're talking about here from start to finish is primarily an Attorney General, what I consider the serious, most egregious, fraudulent type cases.
Yes.
Okay. So from the time the case is initiated, and then there's a determination at some point with BAR that you're going to go to the Attorney General, right? There's a complaint or whatever. You go in and based on what you find at that point, if you think this is a very egregious type fraudulent case, you may say, hey, this is something where we've got to go. This is really a bad situation, and you may want, immediately you're going to go to the Attorney General or file an accusation to take away the shop's license and put them out of business, right? I mean, you'll know that at some point initially during the investigation, or how is that determined?
It's part of that's encompassed in the number that's not up there, the 160 days in 17-18 and 112 days in 16-17 of BAR's portion of the investigation. And so to answer your question, yes, at some point that conversation takes place between the investigator and the supervisor and the field operations management team. Within that period, because we open far more investigations than we actually forward to the Attorney General's office. So not every investigation that we open does it go to the Attorney General. The number is, in a typical year, 200 to 400 cases go to the Attorney General, but at the same time we conduct, and these aren't exact numbers, but in those few thousand investigations that result in something different. Like you said, a proactive conference, an office conference, something like that, a citation.
So I'm just trying to, the timeline. So the time of initiation, and then during that 112 days or whatever you mentioned, you determine it needs to go to the Attorney General. Is it sent to the Attorney General, or is that internally you determine it's going to go to the Attorney General?
The determination of it going to the Attorney General is within the first portions of that 120 days or that 160 days. It's very early on, because once that determination is made, then we have to make sure we have sufficient evidence to support filing with the Attorney General.
Okay.
So it's very early on in the process. The determination is made as to whether this is going to go to the Attorney General or something less than that is going to take place.
And then you do the reports, and then it goes to you review,
right.
And then it goes to the Attorney General.
Correct.
So the time frame from initiation to it's handed over to the Attorney General, how many days is that?
160 in 17-18 and 112 in 16-17.
Okay, 160 days. Okay.
Yes.
So
average?
That's the average.
So
there are some that run longer, some that matter of just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to focus on what the BAR in terms of the initiation, you report internally, and when you hand it to the Attorney General, and you said it was 160 days in 2017?
Yes, 17, 18.
Which is probably, what, 5 months? What is that? Or about
just
5 months?
5.5 months, yeah.
Okay, that's what it takes. That's like kind of the minimum, or is it around?
That's the average.
The average. That's the average. So sometimes it could take sooner than that.
Yes.
Sometimes later. Okay.
Yes.
So that, and so, but as we were going through all these days, 800 days, there's just seems like a lot of, it's out of your hands. It goes to the Attorney General. What's the average from the time you give it to the Attorney General, and then it comes back to you for additional review? I mean, how long does it take them to do the pleadings on average?
I don't know that I have that number.
Okay.
I mean, we could run a report and get it. I could make an estimation, but I'm not.
The reason I'm probing is I wanted to find out if there's any way to kind of speed up the process.
It'll vary from office to office and DAG to DAG.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on their caseload. They're serving, I don't know how many other licensing entities, not just at
Right.
DCA, but other departments, presumably. So they've got, I don't know what
It's
they're...
mostly just DCA.
Mostly
It's
DCA?
the
Okay.
licensing section of the AG, I think, covers mostly
Okay, I thought there
DCA.
were others, but
And-
yeah, it is 38 programs here at DCA, including BAR.
The number I've heard in conversations, and I have a lot of conversation with supervising and regular general deputy attorney generals, attorneys general, deputy attorneys general. We had a long discussion of the plural of that. But that's the typical number I hear frequently is 120 cases per DAG.
I just wanted to comment on the 160 days average in 17, 18, and 112? Yeah, 112 days for 16, 17. You've made the comment some are just weeks, like some of our smog check data only cases. That could
Exactly.
be days, weeks. Yeah, those are getting much faster. But a transmission case with potentially 2, 3 undercover vehicle runs,
May take a bit longer.
that will take some time. Documenting that, I mean, a vehicle of that was, I forgot how many hours I heard the other day. 180 was someone saying per vehicle? I mean,
Yeah,
kind of
I
on a
don't-
transmission. I don't know. Someone was telling me that. I mean,
Maybe
and
I'll
then,
get a text real quick.
And then the DDoC process of each vehicle. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a number of hours associated with that. So a case of that magnitude, that complex, is going to take months.
Yes.
I mean, maybe a year.
And all of it is, we're not going to rush the process because, like you said, Jack, we're essentially putting somebody out of business, or we're seeking to put somebody out of business. We don't go into an investigation hoping for probation. The recognition is that we're looking to revoke the license and their opportunity to do business. We don't want to have less than high quality evidence to support that action.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to, the timeline, because when I hear 3 years in the media, it takes so long, and now you're telling me, average is 5.5 months, and there's other people involved in the process, including the Attorney General and reviews. I think that's important information to put in context as to why it's taking so long here, and we're trying to figure out ways to maybe assist the BAR in terms of if there's areas where we can improve the process and streamline it, quicker. I just wanted to explore that a little bit and answer and probe those questions, but thank you.
Certainly.
Yes, Mr. Gallo.
Just a quick follow-up comment. I think it really just to finish my other comment earlier, I think if we really go back to the first time this reporter came at the industry, came at BAR, it all centered around the fact that they wanted all the complaint history posted on BAR's website. I mean, that was the real issue that the reporter had at the time. He wanted all the numbers, all the facts and figures, and everybody was saying, no, we've already gone this round. We went through it with the NOV issue. We went through it with the lawsuits that were filed after all the Trevor Law Group and other frivolous lawsuits. And we said, no, we're not putting that information out there. You want to find out more or an allegation or a charge against the facility? Okay, that'll be out there. But all these other complaints that you're looking for, we're just not going to have it out there. And that's really where this whole thing started almost 3 years ago now.
Thank you, Pat. What I wanted to do was just make some observations about Bill's case processing overview, which was very accurate. First of all, you mentioned the bar investigatory report. We've been defending bar cases for over 35 years now, and so we're very familiar with the process that you've laid out. In the bar investigative report, it's more than just the findings of the investigators. It's supported by affidavits, it's supported by all kinds of different documents, things that we study to make sure that bar, as Bill has said, the bar has done their work and has documented the case to the fullest extent that they can. Many times in the investigative report, the bar investigators will set forth a series of alleged violations or violations of the law that they think has occurred. When that report gets forwarded over to the Deputy Attorney General's office for review and an accusation is filed, not all of the charges in the investigative report find their way into the accusation. So there's a further filtering, a further vetting of the evidence that the bar has uncovered. So I think that's important to understand that not everything that the bar investigators believe they found by way of violations of the law are charged in the accusation for a variety of reasons. As to the hearing itself, when I think it's important for the audience to understand that the vast majority of accusations that are filed by the Deputy Attorney General on behalf of the bar, they're settled. They don't go to hearing. And there's a multitude of reasons why these accusations get settled. First, you saw the different things that the bar can do, different actions the bar can take after the administrative law judge renders a proposed decision. The key word is proposed. That decision, proposed decision, is not a decision of the bar. It only becomes a decision of the bar after the proposed decision is given to the bar after hearing. We don't see the proposed decision. We don't see that proposed decision until after adoption or rejection, where bar can do an alternate decision. So we don't even know for a long time after a hearing what is the proposed decision of the administrative law judge. But one of the reasons that we frequently find ourselves recommending settlement of cases is because it's a very expensive endeavor to defend an administrative law case, especially when you have a case where you have multiple shops that have been charged and multiple undercover runs. It would be hard for me to remember a case where I defended an ARD where there was a single undercover run. Most of the time the bar's going to run at least 2 or more undercover runs on a single shop just to make sure that their allegations are solid. That takes time. In the investigative report, you will find the declarations of the bar technicians who work on the undercover cars, how much time it takes them, the chain of custody, so on and so forth. And it doesn't happen overnight. To set up an undercover car and to run the car, it's going to take a couple months. And then if there's going to be more than one undercover operation, it's going to take more than just a couple months before the bar is satisfied that the investigation has been complete. When the investigation report, when we're served with the investigation report and we can really see what happened, there's different ways that shop owners look at that report. Now, typically, in a situation where you have multiple shops, the shop owner can't be present at each shop all day long to supervise the operations. The shop owner has to depend upon their managers and regional managers to really watch what's going on. But many, many times, that investigative report, when we get it and we review it, the shop owner then becomes aware of the problem. And more than just what's stated in the accusation, which comes before the discovery, the shop owner doesn't know about the problem. So the whole process can become one of education for the shop and the shop owner, uncover the problem, and most importantly, figure out why it occurred and how they're going to prevent it from reoccurring in the future. So yes, it's an adversarial process. Yes, BAR for our clients is the prosecutor, but it's also an opportunity to learn about your own business model, your own operational model, and look to how to improve the model and really use it constructively as an educational process. And to the extent that we can work with the BAR in that regard, we do try to do that.
Thank you, Lou. Any others? I'll go to the audience. Bud Rice.
Bud Rice with Quality Tune-Up Shops. I kind of wanted to make a couple of comments. Charlie Ayers and I were having a conversation earlier before the meeting started, and it had to do with the work of a compliance officer working for an organization. And if they're on it and they're really concentrating on making sure that the organization follows all the rules and regulations and that kind of thing, then you manage to avoid any of the stuff that we were seeing on the chart here today. The issue happens, though, is that upper management goes, you know, we haven't had any complaints or any issues for a long time. Why do we have this guy? You know, so the reason you don't is because you had the guy, and that's the truth of the matter. Okay. I'd like to talk for a second, though, at the front end of this process, and that is, if in fact BAR has an indication. I'm kind of following up a little bit on what Lou said a second ago. If there's an indication that there's something going on, I'd love the process to be, Bill calls me up, says, Bud, hi, it's Bill Thomas. Well, hi, Bill, how you doing? He goes, well, I've got some concerns. Okay, well, if you've got some concerns, I've got some concerns. Let's hear about it. And he lays out some things that aren't straight. And I go, well, whoa, okay, I got it. So then I go to work and I clean that stuff up, right? And I assure him I'm going to go to work. That conversation took 4 minutes. It certainly didn't take 165 days, okay? It took 4 minutes. And with that 4 minutes, he's going to have an impact on everything that happens at our organization from that 4 minutes, okay? And from that, we got a chance to get all the way around this. Now, Bill has an obligation to then say, okay, Bud, help me out here now, because we got to get this straight, because if not, we got to jump to slide number 12. And I go, I don't want to go to slide number 12, so you got it. Okay, so this back and forth stuff here can go a long way towards getting around all this stuff. And then to finish my story, then Pat gets to go in front of the legislature when they have their thing every 4 years or whenever, and they go, so how many guys did you throw in the pokey? He goes, well, geez, we haven't had a lot of problems. Well, why do we have the BAR? You have the BAR so you don't have these problems, just like you had this issue with the compliance officer. So I love my 4 minutes, is what I'm trying to say. Give me my 4 minutes.
Excellent comments. Thank you, Bud. We didn't lay out some of those other processes, but I think we could do that at another meeting. This was just to look at the formal disciplinary cases. There are other avenues, educational avenues, and other meetings, office conferences in particular that many are chiming in on, that we could share some of those other communication methods, let's just say, to gain compliance. This is when it's so egregious, or there have been many attempts through office conferences and other educational attempts to gain compliance with no success. So, this was just looking at the formal disciplinary process. There are informal, I won't say disciplinary, but educational type processes to gain compliance. And we can share those or talk about those at a future meeting.
I would say those conversations, I can say, those conversations take place every day, those 4-minute conversations between field reps and repair facilities. And generally, Bud, just to let you know, most of the accusations we file, if I have that conversation with the respondent, their response is not, Bill, your problem is my problem. It's generally different than that.
All right, we got to wrap it up. I'll take one more, Charlie, quickly. We've got still a little bit of the agenda to get through, and actually something I really want this group to participate in, which is there's an exercise, a little not a demonstration, an interactive process that we want to engage you in with respect to our enforcement licensing modernization. So hold on, and now we'll turn to Charlie for one comment, hopefully.
Thank you, Chief DeRay and interested parties, Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals, representing motorists. And the unfortunate part of this discussion is the bad behavior ends up at the end of the day being bad behavior. Now he's working for his mother-in-law, whatever, and we don't really fix the problem in spite of the amount of assets being distributed. I once heard a story, a rumor, that a member of the Bureau of Automotive Repair got a complaint. The complaint was from a single mom. She bought a car 2 years before, got a smog check, failed for everything possible on this car. The guy goes and looks at the car. Everything on the car is bad. He goes to the station that certified the car 2 years before, sold as is, but gets all the data and information from that used car dealer, goes to the dealer, says, I want to see the smog check certs on the vehicles on this lot. Oh, none of these cars have been sold. There are no certificates on any of them. He says, well, that's very interesting because I got all the listing here. This lady, her car is not fixed. I'd like to see it fixed. I'd like to see all the cars on your lot fixed, and I'll be back. That process resulted in her car got fixed. Every car on the lot got fixed. A year later, they were still all fixed. 3 years later, they were still all fixed. One conversation fixed it. But we don't do that, ever. We need to start giving that some real consideration, not degrading at all, that when we got a bad actor, he needs to be gone. But unfortunately, we're never getting them gone. So we need to put something out in front that might function a whole lot better. And that didn't happen just in one hot shop. It happened in many shops. And this story has been here many times over time. But so far, we haven't got anybody to listen. But I'm going to continue to stay, and I'm not going away, and I'm going to get this done one way or another because the public deserves better air and better quality services in California starting today. Thank you, Mr. DeRay.
Thank you, Charlie. Any others? Looks like it. Bill, excellent presentation.
Thank you, Pat.
I thought it was very necessary that we come forward today and kind of lay it all out. And I think maybe coming back with the kind of the educational piece and describing in more detail the non-formal disciplinary processes and all the tactics or techniques that we use would be a good idea too.
Kind of a good bar, bad bar type thing. But we did the bad first.
Take me to the bar.
Thank you.
Can I just...
I got to move on.
10 seconds for that?
10 seconds.
There was one shop that refused to correct their problem that was immediately removed from business permanently. So this is a process that can work absolutely starting today.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We have a handout that's referenced on the agenda, the enforcement statistics update. Are there any questions relative to that handout? It's become pretty boilerplate information, just comparing enforcement statistics from calendar year quarter to then from last year to this year. I don't think there's anything new there, new and surprising. It's all same kind of data, just new, different year, new, different quarter. Okay. We are going to take a 5-minute break because our next and final fairly substantive agenda item on the enforcement licensing modernization overview needs some setup. It is interactive. I encourage you to stick around. Don't leave for this. This is going to be good. We really need some valuable input from all of our stakeholders, and this group is certainly one of them. So stick around. Take a few minutes to use the restroom or whatever you need to do, but let's get started back up here at 12:15. Thank you. Formal presentation of the day. Boy, it was a busy agenda. We were going so well, too, until Bill had to come up here. Jeez.
Poor Bill.
I should have known better. All right, welcome everyone back to, after the 5-minute break we had, to our Bar Advisory Group meeting. I just wanted to give everyone that additives, Alan Morrison looked it up, the additives citation, the legal citation is Business and Professions Code, section 13701. All right? Business and Professions Code, section 13701. Thank you, Alan. All right. Our final presentation, Enforcement Licensing Modernization, or what we're calling ELM. Because CAL-VISTA's, we're done, and Clay wanted another big project to take a few more years of his life. So we're going to give an overview of where we are and where we're headed. Clay from our executive office, Clay Leak, and Tim Nye with RMA Consulting are here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I know everybody's probably getting hungry and restless, so we'll kind of do this as quickly as we can. I definitely want to get to Tim's part of the presentation, which is really kind of the meat of today. Get some creative juices flowing and maybe get some people even out of their seats and moving around. So, ELM background. So, a lot of you may have been familiar or heard of the BREEZE project. It was a project undertaken by the Department of Consumer Affairs several years ago with the goal of consolidating all the DCA regulatory entities into a single licensing and enforcement system. Release 3, which included BAR, CSLB, other boards and bureaus, was canceled in January of 2015. 18 regulatory entities successfully moved on to BREEZE and are currently using BREEZE. 16 regulatory entities are still seeking to modernize our business processes, including BAR. We have been tasked with moving forward with a formal project to modernize the enforcement and licensing programs, and have been working to do so about over the last year or so. I know I provided a brief presentation on ELM a ways back, but a lot's happened between now and then. Just a little bit more background. AB 111 was passed with some language that included some direction from the legislature in terms of modernization requirements, and also included some reporting requirements that we are currently meeting. Secondly, DCA published a business modernization plan in response to AB 111, which provided further direction to the 16 boards and bureaus seeking to modernize our enforcement and licensing programs. ELM phases. So obviously this project is still kind of in its infancy. I would call it in a concept phase or initiation phase. So phase 1 right now is really an emphasis on business process reengineering, looking at our enforcement processes, looking at our licensing processes, and making sure we understand them, making sure we are applying them consistently, making sure that we optimize these processes prior to a technology response, prior to a large technology effort. So over on the left side over here, if you're interested in some of the work that's been going on, Tim and his team have been engaged with BAR for the last year or so, spent a lot of time with our enforcement and licensing programs, getting into the weeds of every business process in licensing, every business process is associated with enforcement, and documenting them so we all understand what they are and what they aren't. They've done some fantastic work, so I'd like to thank you and your team, and also the subject matter experts for BAR that have done a fantastic job so far. These are high-level business process models. There are hundreds of pages of detailed business process models supporting these kind of higher-level pictures. So I think to date we're up to 253 processes within enforcement and licensing. Very complex and a lot of work. But it's very critical work, very necessary work. And again, they're up there on the wall if you're interested in kind of taking a look at kind of the picture that we're painting in terms of business processes and how they work. Phase 2, system
which would include our last presentation, our formal disciplinary process.
Absolutely, even used car lot inspections and other processes that we conduct regularly. Phase 2, system requirements and business needs. So again, this is kind of part of what I would call business readiness activities. Again, defining solution requirements at a fairly high level and developing user stories and use cases that support those requirements. So from the from the perspective of a user of the system, how do you represent that interaction and how do you document that? And today's exercise will kind of touch on that a little bit because everybody in this room is potentially a user. Phase 3, the project approval lifecycle, or the project inside the project, as I like to call it. Prior to a formal project being started, we have to work with the Department of Technology, go through the 4 stages, which I'll touch on briefly in my next slide. And finally, system implementation. Incremental delivery versus big bang is something I'll talk about a little bit. Certainly the direction that we've received from the department and other interested stakeholders like the legislature is smaller incremental functionality with less risk is the desired path, and that's something that we are certainly going to evaluate as part of the scoping of this project. Project approval lifecycle, I don't want to belabor the details of this because I know everybody's already tired and I don't want everybody to go to sleep, but the project approval lifecycle, 4 phases. This S1BA, or the Stage 1 business analysis, is the first document that's produced. The Stage 2 alternatives analysis, in which we look at market solutions, commercial off-the-shelf software, custom development, right? What are the options? What are the alternatives that we have on our plate in order to meet our goals and objectives? Stage 3, which is the procurement. Stage 4, which is the finalization of project details and execution of any associated solicitations, RFP, RFOs, RFIs, etc. Historically, a lot of you may have known this as the FSR process. The FSR process is no more. The project approval lifecycle is the new way in which the state authorizes projects to be initiated and started. Picture's worth 1,000 words. I wanted to touch briefly on Agile versus waterfall software development methodologies. I don't want to certainly belabor the point, but traditional IT projects sometimes fail, as we all know. And a lot of the challenges can be really simplified. This is a comic book strip that's been floating around for years, but I thought it was really applicable, and I just kind of wanted to walk everybody through the traditional process and where a lot of IT projects fail. You see the first picture here is how the customer explained it. It looks like a pretty simple swing, right, with 3 steps. The second is how the project leader understood it. So you have an IT person running the project that gathered these requirements, and they missed a few things, but it's pretty close, right? We could still use the swing. The third picture is how the systems analyst designed it. So we've now handed off our requirements to a business analyst that's writing functional specifications. I don't know if that's going to work. I got to be honest. I'm not sure that one's going to get us where we need to be. Finally, how the programmer wrote it. So we've handed off our design specifications to a programmer who's now developing code. Doesn't look like much where we started. Finally, what the customer really needed. It was a tire swing the whole time, and we kind of missed the boat. And we spent a lot of time and money getting to an answer that we didn't need and we didn't want to be at. So the whole concept of agile, iterative software development methodology and delivery is something that's really come a long way over the last 15 years. It's a practice I've adopted and used for 15 plus years. It's something the state's really come around and is adopting. The goal of this iterative agile approach is to make sure we understand what you need right up front and make sure there's a lot more iterations and a lot more interaction between our subject matter experts, our business users, and our programming team. And you eliminate this misunderstanding. So that's really the goal of what we're setting up from a methodology perspective. And that's really why we want to have this exercise at the tail half of this meeting. We want to get an understanding for what you as end users need. And we want to start that dialogue today, and we want to continue having that dialogue through the course of this whole project, because we don't want to end up where that swing's tied around the side and it's hanging on the ground. That's not what we want. We want to build what you need. So timeline, this is something that we've shared in our reporting to the legislature. It's obviously the project's in concept phase, so this is, could change dramatically depending on the scope and how we kind of move this project forward as we go through the project approval lifecycle. The other reason I want to show this timeline is to just briefly talk about the plane analogy. Any IT project requires a ton of resources, both from the IT side and from the program side. As we move through this project, a ton of resources from both licensing and enforcement will be redirected to support this project. They have a ton of really intensive activities like developing test cases, writing functional specifications, the actual testing, development, implementation, right? These are all activities that are going to take resources. So just something to be aware of. Obviously, we will continue to regulate the industry as effectively as we can, but this is a huge level of effort for BAR, and I want everybody to understand that. So real talk, you know, the applications we use to support licensing and enforcement are ancient. Modernization is way overdue. I briefly mentioned PAL, the California Department of Technology State Information Management Manual. SIM 19 is really what guides us, and that's the law that we're required to follow. So there are some constraints and some limitations in terms of what we can't do and how fast we can move and where the approval points are. We obviously intend on following all those. That's where that direction is. Minimization of risk. I've talked about incremental delivery. The concept of a minimally viable product is a really powerful concept. We don't need to build everything that we could possibly ever need to modernize enforcement and licensing to go live. We need to meet a set of minimum requirements, a set of minimum functionality that allows us to move forward, and we need to build a framework to improve that over time. How do you get to this MVP? We get to there by prioritizing measuring business value. Prioritizing business value, measurable business value. Again, kind of touches on the exercise we want to do today. But understanding the programs, understanding the processes, and understanding where the potential efficiencies are is how we prioritize that and how we get to an MVP. Finally, you know, increasing efficiency is really the goal of all this, and it's not just technology. This technology isn't going to fix all of our problems. It's always a blend of people, processes, and technology, and that's something that we'll continue to preach as we move through this project. The people have to be trained. The people have to be ready. Formal change management is really important. The processes have to be in place. We have to understand what these processes are and why we do them. And once we understand those two things and we have those two pieces, the technology can help us fill in the rest. Internal versus external capabilities. I think this is a lot of stakeholders for this project. Obviously, internally, we're really focused on efficiencies. Externally, different stakeholders have a lot of different priorities. So this is something we'll be continuing to balance and work on through this project as well. And obviously want to engage this group as much as possible and make sure we understand your needs and we're able to prioritize those as efficiently as possible. Finally, continuous improvement. A lot of the applications we use today were built, I don't know, in the 60s or 70s and have remained pretty stagnant. I think my goal is not just to build a new system. My goal is to build a new system and establish a framework for continuous improvement. So when we do have changes that are needed, we can make those changes efficiently, we can make those changes quickly, and we can be reactive. That's the ultimate goal, is to build something that breathes and lives and evolves rapidly, not slowly. And with that, I will hand it off to Tim. I apologize, I probably went a little longer than I meant to.
Great, thank you, Clay. So what is ELM? ELM is a system, and for those who aren't familiar with systems and IT, ELM is much more than software and technology. So for you to get the improvements that you need, we have to look at it from three perspectives.
Can we get I think your mic's not on. Oh. There's a button at the bottom.
There we go. I'll try not to yell now.
There you go.
So for ELM to succeed, we really have to look at three fundamental aspects. It is going to be a system, which means that it's more than just technology. Technology enables processes. Processes are performed by people. All three have to work harmoniously together for ELM to be successful. So as we're looking at this, right now we're just in the foundational steps of understanding what ELM needs to be to achieve the efficiencies that BAR needs. What are the opportunities that we can improve upon? What are some of the problems that BAR has meeting its mandatory functions? And so on to the next slide. ELM will support BAR. So if we start from the very base premise of BAR, let's look at the mission, the vision, and the values, because the system has to support all of that, including the strategic plan. And right now, just in terms of just kind of an update, we are going through an effort right now to define the feasibility and the business case for ELM, and we're starting very much at this high level of what is the mission of BAR, what is the vision of BAR, and what are its core values. And then we're actually looking at what are the problems and opportunities that we can address as part of our business case or feasibility study that will end up going through that project approval life cycle. And that project approval life cycle is very much, as Clay said, it's controlled by the California Department of Technology. We don't have a lot of control over that, so we may fly through it. We may run into roadblocks. I'm sure we'll run into roadblocks, but we'll get through those. On the next slide, ELM presents opportunities, and that's really where we're at today, is some of the opportunities that have been defined to date as part of the modernization is to increase the standardization across existing business processes. That first bullet right there is probably one of the most important, which is why we've spent an inordinate amount of time to document over 250 business processes. We really need to get an understanding for how BAR operates today. What's the technology footprint look like? How efficient are the processes? What are some of the problems? What are some of the staffing problems? Are there training issues? So we need to increase standardization so that regardless if you're in the Irvine field office or you're in the San Francisco field office, the process looks very much similar. They are similar right now. It's just that because of various criteria, staffing issues, things of that nature, each office operates a little bit differently. So we want to increase that standardization. We want to improve efficiency of the existing business processes. Bill gave a great presentation earlier on how long it takes to get through the formal investigation process working with the Attorney General's office. What are some of the things that we can do to improve the efficiency on BAR's end and also provide information to the Attorney General that they need so that it can help improve their timeliness in closing those cases as well. Improved workload management. Who's working on a case, who's working on a various step of a process, do we have clear roles and responsibilities in place from organizational units within BAR, clearly defined key performance indicators. These right here, the vision of moving towards modernization, technology exists today to where we can really implement something to capture those KPIs from the system versus having to have manual checkoffs or something because the process is paper-based, as much of the processes are right now. Improved reporting and access to data. Similarly, by having an integrated set of software that all communicates with one another, we can improve that reporting so it's not a matter. Right now, it's a very manual process to put those statistical figures together. All the information is available, but it's all in different systems and different software packages. Improved consumer access to licensee performance data, shifting to paperless processing. The industry has been talking about moving to paperless for 30 years. We really are at a crux right now in the industry where we're starting to see a lot of this move towards electronic format, digital transformation, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. So business modernization is now, the term that's kind of being coined now is digital transformation, but it really is a shift to move towards paperless electronic digital processing. Improved online capabilities for licensees and consumers. We very much want to leverage that so that there's more self-service for the repair facilities as well as consumers to file complaints and so forth, and stakeholders like yourselves that may want a presentation on what BAR does. Online application processing and reduced costs. So these are just a few of the opportunities that we've identified so far, but we really want to kind of peel back the layer and look at all the various stakeholders and their interactions with BAR and ask you, what are some of the challenges that you're facing, and do you have any ideas for if we could define the future, right, what would the optimal state be? And so moving on to the next slide, who will benefit from ELM? This is where we're going to take a little activity, and we're going to ask you to think of any challenges that you're experiencing right now, that maybe some of your constituents are experiencing right now. If you have any ideas readily available to alleviate some of the problems that you know of. And this is not defining firm requirements. We're really just kind of brainstorming right now to just get the ideas out. And we want to think digitally. We want to think future. because whatever we implement for Elm needs to be with BAR for, just like CAL-VISTA said, for the next 10 to 15 years, right? So we need to design a scalable system that's going to meet BAR's needs today and into the future. And so when I kind of put my hat on originally thinking about the future, I just naturally go to the Jetsons, right? I mean, what's more futuristic than a flying car and a robot? And of course, the dog was awesome also. But if it's done using paper today, it can likely be done digitally in the future. Digital devices today, they include PCs, tablets, mobile phones, even VR glasses. How do VR glasses get integrated with BAR? Well, if you think about technicians and training, right? VR glasses they're already being used in the industry, not necessarily automotive repair, but say in the plumbing industry, I know that they actually develop training now where you can have VR glasses and it can pinpoint specific areas to train people on how to do things. Not necessarily that will be part of Elm, but let's explore all those opportunities, and then we can settle on the minimum viable product once we get there. How can manual tasks be automated? Voice to text. I'm sure everyone gets robocalls here. Those are not real people. Optical character recognition. This is scanning documents that convert it directly to text that you can copy into a Word document. Predictive analytics. If you're seeing trends that stations are exhibiting behaviors, there's technology today with artificial intelligence and so forth that can help kind of pinpoint where the logical next step that person is going to take in terms of that pattern behavior. And then think about how technology is used today in your personal life. We all have iPhones, we all have tablets, we all have PCs. Think about how you use your phone today just to interact with various services that you do. How could that be extended to BAR? And then what do you need from Elm? Let's just think broadly, what if? What if anything was possible? What if you could have anything that you wanted for BAR, for a new system that would help BAR to achieve its mission and reach its vision very clearly so that everyone has access to the same information? With that,
real quick before we dive into the exercise, we've done this internally with BAR staff and plan to continue doing it with other stakeholders. One of the interesting outputs, some of these ideas that have come up, we've looked at these ideas and thought, well, gee, we don't need to wait for Elm. This is something we could do today. So one of the ideas that came up was actually putting a QR code, for those that know what a QR code is, on an ARD station wall license. A QR code is basically a barcode in a square format that when you scan it with your cell phone or tablet will take you directly to a website. So a QR code is very flexible. It's not just a website. You can actually embed data into the QR code so it could take you to a very specific website. So the use case for this particular example was if a consumer is in a station and say an ARD wall license happened to have a QR code on it, and a consumer could scan that QR code and they'd be taken to a website that said, would you like to file a complaint? Would you like to see disciplinary history for this station? Or would you like to schedule an auto body inspection? And when they clicked, I want to see disciplinary history, it would take them to the DCA search page specific to that station. They wouldn't have to click down, they wouldn't have to enter the ARD number, they wouldn't have to search for the name. It would take them straight to the disciplinary history page and they could see if that station had any disciplinary history. Or if they wanted to file a complaint, it would pre-populate our complaint form with that station information so they wouldn't have to do any of that. Quicker to route, easier for us to receive and process, a lot of efficiencies to be gained. So that's something we're looking seriously at right now. But there's no bad ideas at this point. And some of these ideas, I guess my point is we may not have to wait. Some of these could happen sooner than later. So.
Great point. So, so with that, we're going to take about 5 minutes per. We have 4 user profiles or customer profiles that we've put together for you. Hopefully, they're relevant to this audience. And the first one that we have up here is the consumer. And so, kind of on what Clay was talking about, if we think about what a consumer would say in the future after Elm has been implemented, or even before, right? If it's something that BAR could do aside from Elm. I filed a complaint simply by scanning the BAR QR code posted at the repair facility. versus having to search for the bar consumer information number, call DCA, log a complaint, wait for someone to call them back, right? They could instantly just scan it with their phone. It could go into an automated workflow queue within the ELM system, be assigned to a program representative in the field office, and that's in the region that that complaint is for, and automatically be assigned. And so now there's no delay in terms of BAR getting an understanding of, oh, we have a new complaint. It's now instantly there. It's in a queue, and all they have to do now is just do a little bit of research, call that person back, get the information, and proceed with the complaint. So some of the other common interactions that consumers do, they request auto body inspections, they file complaints, and they seek information about BAR programs as well as other California programs. So let's take 5 minutes. I've given everyone Post-it notes. If you have any ideas in terms of challenges that, from a consumer standpoint, that you've heard from your various constituents and so forth, that they have problems with BAR, or they have ideas. If you just have any ideas, let's jot them down. And I encourage people in the audience also to jot those down as well, and we can come along and pick those up. And we've got some posters in the back that we'll put those on, so we capture those for the record. And again, this is just a brainstorming exercise, just to kind of get, as Clay said, the creative juices flowing. But we really want to look at it from a customer perspective first.
Easier for them to complain. Okay.
Huh?
The low and say, here's the bar's doing, right? Here's the point. Easily found out the information like I skip over.
Sure. This would be more on the business side of it. There you go. I like those. Good in mind. All right, we gotta go. Yeah, because it's coming up.
Okay, let's move on to the next one here.
You want to read any of them, or just a couple
can,
quick
if-
ones?
if-
I know
unless
it's hard
we're-
with
unless
the mic is. Tim, you got a mic right here, a mobile mic, real quick. Just read a couple off, just to give people a sense of some of the ideas coming out.
Unplugging.
I got one.
All right, so we have a couple of ideas. Handwriting may be an issue. I'm going to be totally honest. Got one here for include QR codes on all key BAR documents and booklets. Pre-populate consumer complaint form when they enter the ARD. List registered ARDs in my zip code area. Sounds like a website idea. Simplify officer and name changes for ARD applications. Consumer receiving receipt of smog test transmission are a few of the ideas. Thank you, guys. All good stuff.
So the next one, we can move to the next slide. Oh, I've got it here. So the next one is a repair facility owner. So if we're looking into the future, one thought is a repair facility owner could come back and say, it took less than 5 minutes to renew my license and pay the fee using the BAR phone app. So think about that. We all have iPhones. If BAR has a phone app and an ARD has an account with BAR, they could literally get an alert on their phone saying, your renewal is up, would you like to renew now? Or they could have an automatic renewal where they don't even have to do anything. They just get a text, a confirmation text saying, your application has been renewed. Congratulations. So so let's take a few minutes. I'll read out some of these interactions while everyone's kind of brainstorming. They submit registration and license applications. They pay application and license fees for both initial, renewal, and late. They maintain appropriate automotive repair certifications. They perform auto repair and smog testing. They comply with California laws and regulations. They pay citation fines. And they attend education and disciplinary conferences. Now, there's probably a lot more, but these are just some of the more common ones. So again, just think, what if I, as an automotive repair dealer, anything that would make my life easier interacting with BAR?
Take yours up.
Okay, so and if you still have some on consumer repair facility, feel free to continue doing that. We'll just go through these other two real quickly. The third one is a consumer advocate. So I like the virtual assistant feature. I just said what I wanted, and the system translated my voice message and sent me a text confirmation, right? So consumer advocates, they request presentations such as Right at Right, senior scam stoppers, things of that nature, right? We have an intake process currently for taking in those requests, but how cool would that be if they could just call the phone and through voice-to-text recognition, the system just automatically translates their voice and then submits that request directly into that workflow queue like we talked about earlier, and it gets assigned. And now it's simplified the intake process considerably through the use of technology. And then the other one, and so go ahead and continue brainstorming on all three of those. And then the fourth one that you can think about also is an industry training provider. So they provide training to automotive repair technicians. They verify the status of certifications, maintain training, certification, and requirements and programs. And thinking in the future, I am able to link our database directly with ELM to provide training reminders and e-verifications of training certification versus having to call and figure out who I'm going to call next. And quite honestly, I don't have a lot of details on this external process, so I'm a little ignorant in terms of what exactly the training providers do. So just being upfront with you. But I would think that could be something that technology could absolutely do in terms of e-verification. We do it for electronic health records today. There's no reason why we can't do it for automotive repair training certifications. So let's take a few minutes and
So while everybody's finishing up, I know we're losing a little steam. I think everybody's suffering from low blood sugar. I know I am. But I mean, you guys get the idea, right? This project is a blank slate. Everybody in here is a key stakeholder of this project, and we want to solicit that input. Obviously, this exercise, we'll probably get a few good ideas. I'll be totally honest. Every time we've done this, we get some good ideas we haven't thought of. But this is really a dialogue I want to continue having with everybody, and BAR wants to continue having. So as you have these ideas, I'm all ears. we're going to put them all up on the board and talk about them all. So it's a dialogue we want to continue having, and we want to understand all the stakeholder needs and make sure we prioritize those.
Thank you, Clay, and thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, this was just a kind of a demonstration of what we're going to be doing over the months ahead, and even beyond months, maybe even into the next year. And this is by no means the final opportunity to weigh in on this. This was just kind of a sample of what we're going through, a trial run of sorts of the brainstorming sessions we've already initiated, and some really good ideas have come up. We thought, what another great venue to do that is before our stakeholders who are on this advisory group. We could certainly schedule a more formal presentation with a more dedicated, almost in a workshop fashion, at a future bar advisory group meeting or following a bar advisory group meeting. But we just wanted to kind of whet everyone's appetite for what we're going to be working on and how to be a part of that. Okay, any questions or comments? Any final yellow sticky notes? Feel free to throw them up on the 4 pages that are posted on the wall. Thank you. Oh, what's that? Yeah, well, we had a comment behind. Oh, a couple comments. Yeah, come forward. Forgotten your name. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, come on in.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. My name is Bob Dubo, Golden Smog West. My family operates 5 Northern California test-only smog checks. I just had a general commentary to make with one small specific request. The general commentary is that test providers have suffered significantly in the last year. First, we had the new Gen 3 machines, and then more importantly, and dramatically more importantly, AB 1274 came into place that extended smog testing from 6 years to 8 years exemptions. And I realize that both of these changes have had real benefits. Obviously, we want to modernize the Bar 97 machines. And the point of AB 1274 is to reallocate resources that we ideally be more effective to benefiting the environment. But the burden has been on the smog shops. And so I just wanted to take a moment to emphasize that and really point out that ultimately it's going to fall on consumers. Right now we're really seeing an upheaval in all the stations that people are reacting to the loss of volume by lowering prices. And so, that's extending the impact. And ultimately there will be fewer shops and higher prices for the consumer. So my specific request is that we track this. I see in the enhancement stats that there is a number there that shows the number of stations. I'd like us to follow how many stations are actively testing, not just licensed, but are actively testing. I expect that number to reduce significantly in the next year and a half. And I think that, one, I'd like to know that information, but two, I'd like it to be on the forefront of the bar's mind about the impact that the stations have had, particularly that I'm just concerned about new impacts. Obviously, AB 210 is a concern. Love a lot of the things that Clay and others are presenting, modernization and so forth. We're concerned that will become cost for us as station owners. So I'd really like to see that we're tracking what is the impact on the industry over the next year and a half, and keep it in our minds as some of these new improvements are rolled out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for transitioning us on the agenda to the public comment on items not on the agenda. I didn't close off the last presenters officially, but I think we were pretty much done with that exercise. But I appreciate your comments. As you know, some of these things are the acts of the legislature.
Of course.
We certainly weigh in on bills and are asked what is the expected opposition or support of any bill. You're always, with respect to Exemptions are always, the battle is the, weighing against the impacts on the environment versus impacts on the industry. There's always that. Are we testing to all the cars that need to be tested? Is there value? Is there essentially what's the bang for the buck? And so those are things that we always present, and we're always balanced and fair about what the projected impacts on the industry are going to be, but we also have to do an assessment of what the environmental impacts or sacrifice will be for giving up potential number of vehicles as they have. So, legislation will obviously be a driving force for any significant additional changes beyond what we've already seen. But it's been, I remember the days before you probably in this business that we tested everything after the first 2 years.
Right.
And then it slowly went to 4, went to 6, and now we're at 8. And it was the vehicle technology and this expectation that these vehicles are staying clean and producing, well, in some cases, no emissions. There'll be, those vehicles won't be in the program. There might be some other program for them, but certainly the emissions program that we have today doesn't suit those kinds of vehicles, certainly, or a longer duration before their next inspection. I just want to share with you, it's not that the Bureau doesn't support and understand what your industry, as we've heard from all facets of the industry, not just in smog check, what they experience with changes in our laws, and we do our best to represent those views. Obviously, that's kind of our job, and we get asked to kind of discuss all the impacts on all facets of the industry or environmental as well. So try to do a balanced job of doing that.
Of course, and we recognize that the industry is always going to change, and we imagine that this will stabilize. Just want to make sure that the group is aware that the next few months, year and a half, is tough on our industry, and we'd like some sensitivity to that.
Certainly. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, public comment on items that were not on the agenda? Mr. Peters.
Yes, I'm Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professional representing Motors. And the gentleman was sitting here.
I'm not sure if the mic is on, Charlie. Could you turn it on for those who are
Hello,
listening?
Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. Is that better, Mr. DeRay?
I can hear you fine with or without the mic, but I thought others might be challenged to hear you.
You answered my question. Is that better, sir?
Yes, for me. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Possibly for the others. I just want to know who the gentleman that was sitting in this seat, who he is, who he works for or has worked for, that's taking on this enormous project. I'd like to have him identified as to who he is, and if he works for you or if he works for a contractor, who that contractor would be.
Well, he works for us, but he works for a contractor by the name of RMA Consulting. RMA Consulting.
Can I get information as to who that is?
Yeah, his contact information is on the cover.
It's on the slide.
The slide presentation, and the company he works for is on the slide presentation as well.
Thank you.
Other comments not on the agenda? For agenda items that were not on the agenda? No? Mike wants lunch, as do all of us. As do everyone to my left is gone. All right. Well, let me remind everyone, there is a regulatory workshop coming up today at 2 o'clock in this very same room on collision repair and some draft regulations that we have put forth, and we want to discuss with everyone, our stakeholders, bar advisory group members, members of the audience here are welcome to attend. We'll see you back here. Our next meeting at 2 o'clock, if you're so inclined. Our next meeting will be in this room on Thursday, July 18th, 2019. Yeah, July 18th. Thank you all. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate your attendance today. Great meeting. I thought we got through a lot of information today. Thank you.